Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the Supreme Being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Announcements by the Vice President, bills brought from the House of Representatives, petitions, papers, reports from committees, urgent questions, questions on notice, public business, government business, bills second reading.
Honorable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was in progress when the Senate adjourned on Wednesday, October the 23rd, 2018, will be resumed. A bill entitled An Act to Provide the Service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2020. Yesterday we had 11 speakers. Who's the next speaker? Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And firstly, let us welcome the 40 students and about 40 students and teachers who have come from all over Trinidad and Tobago, from Sandy Grande to San Fernando, from Tobago to YTC. We welcome you. We welcome you, Mr. Vice President. Firstly, let me thank the Honourable Minister of Finance for his management of the country's finances over the last 4 years and for his budget preparations, to his staff as well for the hard work that they do, for the Minister in the Ministry of Finance as well, who also contributed to those preparations, and also to our Minister of Planning and Development, who also has a crucial role in our budget preparation. Yesterday, the Senator Lester Henry, and of course in the presentation yesterday, the Minister Alison West would have dealt with the country's economic situation and all of the finances. There's no need for me to go there, but just to say that we found ourselves in a really good place where economic growth has returned, revenue and HSF savings have increased, revenue expenditure is now down substantially and is now sustainable. The government fiscal deficit has been reduced by more than 50%, and inflation is among the lowest in the world. We're number one, Mr. Deputy Speaker, number one, with food inflation down and core inflation also reduced. I just want to make a few comments on the UNC's ill-conceived transformation plans, which they presented. The opposition proposed the elimination of our robust and efficient managed float exchange rate. And I want to say that we do not agree with. What they are speaking about really is devaluing our currency. And again, Senator Lester Henry dealt with that. But let me add, as Minister of Trade and Industry and from the Ministry of Trade and Industry, that we are very strongly agreeing with the government that we are not devaluing the currency in Trinidad and Tobago. There are some that are clamoring for it. Those perhaps are persons who are holding large sums of foreign currency, and of course it will benefit them. They will immediately benefit from such a devaluation. But by and large, businesses will not benefit, certainly not small and medium-sized businesses, certainly not your importers at all. As a matter of fact, all those businesses who are owing money to overseas creditors, their bills will in fact increase overnight. And of course, there's always a possibility of successive devaluations as we had in the 1980s. All of our inputs into manufacturing will be higher. All of our clothes, food, cars will be higher, and so on. And what you would find is that exporters will be relying on that currency difference to improve their, and really and truly what they should be doing is becoming more efficient and more agile and introducing technology and so on into their processes. That's where we want the competitiveness to be, not necessarily the easy way out through the devaluation. And of course, we know that Barbados, right around us, they have survived a lot of the OCS countries without devaluing their currency, and we are strongly in favor of, we stand with the government with this position. And psychologically as well, devaluation is not a good sign. It's always a sign of economic weakness, so that even your credit ratings may be influenced negatively. And when it comes to investments, people, other countries will, and businesses will, and investors will probably look at you as a very weak nation economically. So we're not there. But continuing on the UNC's ill-conceived economic plan, and Senator Mark yesterday spoke about these 5 principles on which their plan was based. Principle number 1, people-centered development, getting people back to work. But we know what you really mean is getting your people back to work. Because when you came into government in 2010, what you did is you fired hundreds of persons in ministries and state enterprise.
Standing Order 46.6 and 46.4 is offensive and insulting, Mr. Vice President.
Yeah, thank you.
Continue.
Hundreds of persons in ministries and state enterprise.
Minister, let me just set the tone for the debate for today's proceeding as we go ahead. Now, yesterday I would have ruled in this budget debate against shouting across the floor when a member is contributing. That ruling continues for today. If you have something to say or raise, you can either ask the member to give way or you raise in a particular standing order. Continue, Minister.
Yes, so I was on principle 1, getting which people back to work. And then, of course, you took an OJT and installed as head of the SIS. That, again, is getting UNC people back to work. And then think about all those persons, the particular persons who got substantial legal fees, UNC attorneys, to the tune of $1 billion. That is what you mean by putting people back to work. Principle number 2, pro-business, allow the private sector to drive growth and development. And you cannot be speaking about private sector projects because you did not. I can remind you about the life sport project, $400 million down the drain, about the massive bid rigging and procurement projects throughout the state enterprise, including the $1 billion Beef and Wastewater project. Is that what you talk about when you say supporting the private sector? And of course, your friends and family alone who really benefited from the number of contracts that passed through you. You talked about principle.
Standing order again, 46.6,
Principle 3, resilience.
Mr. Vice President. Imputing improper motives.
No, the facts.
Senator Beaker, you raise a standing order, and then I expect silence to fall in this chamber to allow me to rule on said point of order. Minister, continue.
Thank you. Principle number 3, deepening economic reforms with some human face. Deepening economic reforms when we know by September 2015, at the end of their term, the economy had gone into recession. Expenditure had exploded under them by 30%, from 46 billion to 62 billion in 2015. What kind of reform you're talking about? And then, of course, the overdraft of the central bank had reached 98% of the legal limit, barely enough funds to run the country for a few days. Massive debts left to contractors, VAT refunds left at $4.5 billion, and arrears to public servants, inflation skyrocketing. You're talking about reforms? You're not able, you don't have the capacity to deepen any reforms. And principle 4, local content, giving people a sense of ownership and independence. Well, we know what happened on Independence Night in 2014, right? The proclamation of Section 34. You're talking about ownership. when you talk, the IPO scandal for the FCB turned out to be a total scandal. And you're talking about independence, and when you had Cambridge Analytica spying on all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We know you, UNC, we know you. The country now knows you. And you talk about principle number 5, sustainability. I can't go on and on because I have a presentation to make. Promoting environmental stewardship. You can't be promoting environmental stewardship when you distributed dozens of questionable leases for prime state lands in Chagaramas. We know you. So therefore, with your track record and the plan which you presented, there is no way, and of course with all the wanton wastage and non-performance, there is no way that we could present you to the population of Trinidad and Tobago. Absolutely. I ask myself, what is your legacy? What is your legacy? What did you leave to this country? What could we identify? What could we identify?
Minister, please, again, I'm not going to stand to my feet and continue to repeat a ruling. There's absolutely no need to shout across the floor to the minister while she's making her contribution. If you have not spoken as yet, you will have the opportunity to speak in the course of this debate, to which you can then respond to anything the minister says in her contribution. That is the proper procedure. Continue, Minister.
Right. I'm not going to spend any more time because we know you left no legacy, not when we can think about things like the Piarco Airport and again the Beetham wastewater and live sport and so on. You left no legacy, no impression on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And it is the PNM who gave free education. It's the PNM who built industry. It's the PNM who built all of those houses in Trinidad and Tobago, all of the courts, all of the roads, the infrastructure, hospitals, all of the primary health care, all those health care institutions right across Trinidad and Tobago. And you know, we used to talk about, Point Lisa, so you reminded me, we used to talk about nursery to tertiary education, but now it is daycare to tertiary education provided by the PNM government. And you talked about corruption yesterday. Let me remind you, and Senator Mark quoted all kinds of indices. Let me remind you about the Global Competitiveness Index. I examined from 2010 to 2015, and I could tell you this is out of 140 countries. Under diversion of public funds, this country worsened 43 points. That's 43 countries down. Public trust in politicians, we worsened 25 points. Irregular payments and bribes worsened 61 points. That is below 61 countries. Favoritism in decisions for government officials, 60 points. Wastefulness of government spending, 37 points. We know you, UNC. The country knows you, UNC. Let me speak now. Mr. Deputy Speaker had spoken in the other place, so I'm going to speak more of. Sorry, Mr. Deputy Vice President. I'm going to make that mistake again. I spoke about more of some things there, and I'm going to speak less of them and more of others here. So let me go straight to trade. And let me say that Trinidad and Tobago's trade performance improved significantly over 2016 to 2018. In fact, the country moved from a trade deficit of $2.7 billion in 2016 to a trade surplus of $12.1 billion in 2018. So exports were valued at $59.7 billion, and your imports were a lot less at $47.71 billion. And these demonstrate, of course, the importance of trade in the economy. And I had said before that trade is important for driving economic growth. We're a small nation, but we're a trading nation. When you look at the fact that the figure of trade to GDP is 132%. We export a lot, energy and non-energy, and we import a lot just as well. So it's very important. So I looked at our trade figures, but the non-energy figures, what I picked up from the review of the economy was static at about 30 billion. And I really have to go deeper. I had to dig deeper into that because sometimes I'm not quite sure of what else is included in there. So I looked for the positives, I looked for the negatives. I'll just tell you some of them. So I looked at some of the non-energy products which we export, and I looked at non-alcoholic beverages, and those, in fact, have increased by 124% from $47 billion to $106 billion. 47 million, sorry, to 106 million. I looked at waste and scrap iron from 41 million back to 80 million, an improvement of 96%. Minister of Agriculture, yellowfin tuna from 29 million to 54 million, 85% increase. Rum from 25 million, rum, UNC, to 46 million, an increase of 95%. Of course, cigarettes increasing as well from 240 million to 297 million. Please don't disturb me. 24, but you're threatening me? You're threatening me. 240 million to 297 million. That's cigarettes. And prepared foods from cereal improved by 14%. I went to the negatives as well, and I looked at where we were with some of the products that went down. Like, for instance, printed books, and we could understand why, because of the age of technology, went down by 43%. Cement, when you know that there was an issue with cement, went down by 39%. But I'm happy to say that I met with TCL 2 days ago, and their exports are now up, so they're balancing 50% of their production for local use and 50% of their production for exports. So we expect to see an improvement there as well. So that there's a lot to look forward. There are some gains, but we got to keep pressing on. Mr. Deputy President, Mr. Vice President, got it right this time. So in September of this year, we would have launched the trade policy, which will guide this country towards 2023. And I have to thank UN. It will be tabled. We haven't had a session to table it yet. We have to thank UNECLAC, who provided the invaluable technical expertise in the drafting of the policy. They were the primary drafters. And I'll tell you that this collaboration came out of a visit to Chile by the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley. When our Prime Minister visits, we always get returns. There are always deliverables. And when he would have met with the UN Executive Secretary, Alicia Barcena. So that came out of that visit. So let me say that because we are a trading nation, it's so very important. It cannot be overstated, the importance of being part of this multilateral trading system, which is governed by the WTO, the World Trade Organization. And what they do is that they critically examine trade policies, strategies, and measures implemented to ensure that there's transparency and commitment and compliance to these multilateral rules. So that this year in May, Trinidad and Tobago would have had its review. It's held every 6 or 7 years, and we would have successfully completed that review. And so we're very pleased about that. I want to say as well another important matter in this whole business of trade is the engagement and developing strong relationships with firms, with different countries, regions, and of course the entire multilateral trading system that governs the network of rules and regulations. And I say so because it's not only the work of Trinidad and of the Ministry of Trade and Industry, it is also the work of the Minister of Foreign Affairs in terms of that commercial relationship with firms, with countries in particular. It's also the work of the Prime Minister, Minister of Agriculture, and all of those other ministers who engage with countries. And I can tell you that we do have significant relationships with the Caribbean countries. It's returned under this government with our Honourable Prime Minister. And as I say Prime Minister, let me just wish our Honourable Prime Minister, from all of us in this House, a very happy birthday. It's his birthday today. I think he hit the big 7-0. So we wish him good health, more grandchildren, and of course, we wish him good health. All of us inside of here, you should be clapping. He is the Prime Minister of our country. He has led this country very, very well, and we greatly appreciate. We wish him God's blessing. So I was speaking about the trade policy and the importance of it. And what is going to set us on a path to doing is improving the facilitative and enabling environment for trade, encouraging the production and export of non-energy goods and services in particular, also increasing the production and export of high value-added goods as well. Of course, increasing our share of CARICOM trade, which is where we started, and inclusive of trade in services, but also increasing our market share in the more traditional and non-traditional markets. So our focus is on CARICOM and also non-CARICOM export expansion as well. So we looked at the export markets. Time runs fast here. And what I want to say is that our markets typically are concentrated in a few countries. I'm talking about CARICOM, the US, and Europe. But what this does, it really makes you more vulnerable, and it really, it's too narrow. And the whole question of diversification of markets is also very important, and more important than diversification of products, because you can make all the products you want. If you have nobody to sell them to, that's it. So the policy expands our outlook in terms of markets to the South America, Central America, to the Asian countries. I was surprised the figure of exports is about 10% to the Asian countries. The Caribbean again, and of course the European economies, and also the USA, particularly to our diaspora communities. So in line with that, I can tell you that we are pursuing our engagement, or furthering our engagement with Chile. Following exploratory discussions in December 2018, we are now on our way to negotiations for a partial scope agreement with Chile, and this commenced in August of this year and is likely to be completed in 6 months. This is going to make Trinidad and Tobago's exports of energy products more competitive in the Chilean market. So that's more, we're focusing on energy products more than anything else in the Chilean market. It's opening up our goods to 18 million persons, and of course is facilitating as well access to cheaper inputs into our production processes of manufactured goods. So Curaçao as well, they've approached us for a partial scope agreement. We are looking at it and we'll go to cabinet with it. We do about $64 million in trade with them, but we feel that we can expand that as well. Even though it's a small country, there are many times more visitors to that country, so that the market is a fairly good one. Brexit and the UK, I want to say that we have done what we have had to do to ensure a smooth rollover with the CARIFORUM UK agreement. We've signed all of the MOUs that are necessary, and the legislation is being prepared so that there will be a seamless transfer, so that goods entering the UK will not, in fact, suffer at all. The businesses will not suffer at all. It will be a seamless transfer, and we will be able to benefit from the tariff preferences. With regard to the exports to the US, and the CBI arrangements, which is a Caribbean-based initiative. More than 200 companies benefit from these CBI arrangements on what is called the CBERA and the CBPTA. And there are a number there's a lot of murmuring. And there are a number of goods that enter the U.S. It's our primary trading market. I'm talking about energy products, agriculture products as well, petroleum, a number of items. And all of these items benefit from this unilateral one-way trading agreement. I'm pleased to say that last week at the WTO General Council meeting, it was agreed that the United States request for a waiver extending the Caribbean Basin Economic Recovery Act has been extended. It has been extended until September 30th, 2025. What will happen now is that this will now go to Congress, where the CBI arrangements will be assessed with all of the beneficiary countries, and we are looking forward, and we are doing the necessary engagements to ensure that this is preserved. Cuba, exports improved by 143%. And that's a population of $11 million. Trinidad and Tobago is their largest Caribbean trading partner, so that 80% of the goods entering Cuba, in fact, are coming from Trinidad and Tobago. So we've risen from 11 million to 27 million. Not huge amounts, but definitely you've seen the exponential, you've seen the increase of about, I think that's more than 150%. And that is because we have our trade facilitation office on the ground. They're doing their work. I take businesses across to, I've taken businesses across to all of the trade fairs and so on, and we are doing well in that market. And additionally, with the introduction of flights from Caribbean Airlines, that is a significant contributor to our increased trade as well. And we will continue to enhance this. Panama and Costa Rica, we are seeing the improvements as well. And also with Colombia, Canada, with our diaspora market, the Dominican Republic, all of those numbers are also going up as well. Even in Guyana, there's a trade mission coming up in November. 18 companies are going. We've also signed a memorandum of understanding on energy. It's very important that we look at exporting our energy services and other services into Guyana. Jamaica as well, our top export market, we continue to work on as well. I've spoken about the fact that our products are very limited, and in terms of the range of products, and we therefore have to look at diversifying the products, the range of products, so that the trade policy also speaks to the expansion of these products. And of course, it identifies a list of products, a list of high value-added products that we can look at, to facilitate growth in our exports, electronic assembly, textile and garment manufacturing for the fashion industry, pharmaceuticals in the areas of agriculture and agro-processing, vegetables and fruit, coffee, tea, spices and cocoa, beverages, fish and fish processing as well, animal feed. And Minister of Agriculture will speak more to that as well. So those are the kinds of rising star products that we have to encourage the manufacturing sector to get involved with. The policy also speaks to the green industries, which are really opportunities again for building resilient businesses. And by that I mean green renewable energy products like solar panel assembly. I'm talking about greening also of the traditional sectors in agriculture and tourism and so on. And there are other green activities and services as well. It also attaches itself to global value chains, very, very important, and something that we have to look at, because trade and production have become increasingly organized around global value chains. And so that it's a way of providing a fast track to industrialization for emerging economies. In other words, we get involved with part of the supply chain, so you don't have to actually produce the end product, but part of the product. And so it's very important that we start looking at that, particularly at the cocoa global value chain. There's more to that we must look at, and that's the kind of economic transformation that we're talking about and that this country badly needs as well. The trade policy also addresses the women, youth, and the differently abled, and their contribution that they can make to improving this country's productive capacity as well, and really reducing and eradicating some of the issues that are associated with women, youth, and differently abled in business. So that is going to be a focus as well. It also speaks to, with all that we're talking, you can't increase your exports, you can't increase your range of products without the private sector engagement. That will continue. A vibrant, dynamic, and resilient private sector is optimal and is critical for growth and trade expansion. And I want to say that there's a strong engagement with the Ministry of Trade and the private sector, and with the rest of the government as well, with the private sector. And we consult with them on all matters relating to CARICOM, all matters relating to trade, to policy development, national quality policy, trade policies, manufacturing policies, services policies, and so on. The diversification. Let me go quickly to the diversification. And there are several areas that somebody said serious areas that this government has targeted for diversification. And one of the early commentators to the budget had said they didn't hear the word diversification mentioned. But we don't have to always mention the word, because we're doing the work. And it is being done under agriculture and agro-processing, and the minister will speak to that. Tourism, financial services as well. And today I will just spend a little bit of time on the creatives, on the manufacturing expansion, because that is diversification as well. Also on services expansion, and also on the maritime industry. So that in the creatives, that is a creative industry, rapidly growing sector, and we are focusing on fashion, music, and film. And I can tell you, even I took a quote from the World Economic Forum in an article published on October 4th of this year, titled "Agile Governance for Creative Economy," where in fact they are endorsing the expansion of the creative industry for improvement in economies. And I'm talking about income generation, job creation, and export earnings. So creativity, small in stature, but it's becoming a well-known brand, because we're doing a lot of work, and we're focusing on self-employment, entrepreneurship, and of course, working on very strong strategic plans. The film industry is expanding and has significant potential. And I have to move faster. I can tell you in 2019, there was a spend of $16 million on film in Trinidad and Tobago. That is spent by foreign film production in Trinidad and Tobago. There were 21 small productions, including The Amazing Race, which some of you may have seen, an episode of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, the National Geographic on Tobago Tourism. So we are getting it in drips, yes, but $16 million is still considerable spend. There have been a number of film familiarization tours for international filmmakers as well in Trinidad. There have been film workshops, and there have been several film tools that have been advanced through Film TT as well, including programs, including tools such as the Production Directory, which is a database of professional services and suppliers in Trinidad, a locations database, which is a database of locations and festivals in Trinidad, a production guide, which is a publication that highlights the benefit and the procedures of filming in Trinidad and Tobago, and the feedback from film crews that have been here are that these tools have been of great value. Of course, our film production expenditure rebate program continues. The animation is expected to grow worldwide, and there's a major event in Trinidad called the Anime Carib Animation and Digital Media Festival, which Film TT supports. And I can tell you what that has done is to put our local animators in touch with the big ones like Pixar and DreamWorks and Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. And that is a platform for sharing knowledge and introducing technologies. But there have been gains because one local animation production company has been able to produce work for Universal Studios and Disney. And of course, he's been contracted by Big Jump Entertainment in Canada at a cost of $230,000 Canadian to produce the animation for season 3 of Animals and HBO TV series. Again, I can't spend much more time, but it's a global. There's increase in animation activity out there, and we want our local people to participate and benefit. Music, the local music industry is being recognized, and more the brand is well known. And of course, what we want to get to the point of is full commercialization and exports. So Music TT has had several capacity building initiatives. 120 participants were trained and certified in music publishing, another 100 in music intellectual property valuation, another 100 again in songwriting, production, and mixing. So many, I can't go on to tell you. There's also the Artist Portfolio Development Program Spotlight. We're in our second cohort of 10 artists. 2 of them have already penetrated the international stage. 1 artist has toured Japan, Bali, Singapore, Australia, and Canada and Portugal. 1 other is performing in Disney's The Lion King. The other 8 have securing performances in Trinidad and Tobago. The Export Academy, the Music Export Academy is focused on initiatives geared towards business education and capacity building, so that there are a number of workshops and webinars and conferences. In fact, there must have been 1,000 persons participating in all of these workshops and webinars and conferences and so on. They've been doing also very well with the Live Music District in the initial phase, 340 performances across 30 venues. I can tell you in the current LMD, 58 venues, 197 artists, over 537 performances. And this is going to continue. And with Music Tech Platform, that's an app that has been launched called AMPT, and that is a functional booking site. And of course, it allows all of us to get on the web and search to find out which artists are performing, what venues, etc., in real time. And as I said, there have been a number of workshops, more than 16 workshops, 1,000 persons benefit in fashion, very lucrative industry. And the focus, again, is on building capacity, manufacturing, financing, retail distribution, and exports. The Bespoke Tailoring Program has been a tremendous success. 26 students have graduated. And, you know, when I was in the lower house, a member of the bench, they sort of calculate for me the benefit of the program by working out the cost per student basis. And what I want to say is that that is very narrow-minded. And I can understand that you don't really know how to build an industry. You don't have the experience. You never built any industry. But I can tell you have to look further than that. It costs, I mean, having an expert, and he's an expert because he has worked on Savile Row. That's Professor Andrew Ramrow, and he's come to Trinidad and sacrificed his time. He has developed this, and we see this as a burgeoning industry. And we're now moving towards the trainers program. We've had testimonials from these students. One of them has said, it has improved my quality and delivery standards. And because of this, I have got customers that are travelers who are used to buying abroad, seeking quality. Now they can get it here in Trinidad and Tobago. We did a lookbook for them, a digital lookbook, and we did some copies, and they to help market their work now. 10 graduates have already moved on to establishing their businesses, and 13 are moving into the Train the Trainers program, which will produce at the end of it another one-year program, an increased number of master tailors who can then train other students in bespoke tailoring. So there's great potential for foreign exchange earnings with this. The Fashion Value Incentive Program working very well. The global value chain, the non-global value chain, the business advisory and financing program, and the strategic training program. Minister of Labour, I want to thank you. Last Saturday, 50 designers in that lower tier of strategic training received certificates for the entrepreneurial development program conducted in collaboration with NEDCO. With regard to the non-global value chain, 11 designers have completed their training with 8 designers, increasing their local and foreign sales by 11 to 44% in some cases, and one designer increasing their sales by 135%. And of course, members, those participants in the non-global value chain, they are beginning to export to South Korea, to Israel, to Australia, to New Zealand, to Samoa, and the Philippines. All of their swimwear, resort wear, ready-to-wear, and the couture dresses and so on. So that has been a tremendous success. There have been about 9 workshops with more than 500 attendees. Maritime is another area that we're working on. How much time do I have?
5 more minutes.
Oh, no. Maritime is another area that we're working on. I can tell you that there's increased activity in terms of transshipment and transshipment trade. There's a Chinese company that is in Bosai. $1.2 billion is there in investment. We are working on a national maritime policy. Again, that is going to help improve the maritime opportunities, and I'm talking about ship repair and dry docking. I want to say as well, it's going to help as well with yachting. I can tell you that the Trinidad and Tobago Yacht Club, by example, is investing. They've given us their commitment, $100 million to expand. That's private sector investment to expand their current $100 million to expand their current facility, which will create 100 additional berths. So when Bill Gates comes to Trinidad and Tobago, he will not be berthed outside, he will be berthed inside. And in the manufacturing sector, which continues to employ close to 60,000 persons, again, all of the incentives are available. And of course, we are introducing the Special Economic Zones policy, which has a number of incentives attached to it, which will benefit the manufacturing sector and a number of other sectors. Our Phoenix Park Industrial Estate we'll have a turn-in pretty soon, by the end of November, and it will be commissioned in 1 year's time. Already we are engaging with participations from China, and we're looking forward to that. The Moruga Industrial Estate, that is going to be commissioned in 1 month before the end of the month. 1 month. 1 month. I have the global trade in services. Regrettably, I don't have the time. We have to focus on that. I'll tell you, when you speak about non-energy contributions to GDP, global trade contributes about 57 to 60% to our economy, but we only export 10%. So the areas of focus must again be on expanding and regulating services as well. Small and medium-sized enterprises, we have had a great focus on that with a number of funding facilities, the grant fund facility impacting small and medium-sized businesses. We are already seeing the results of that. I'm going to publish it, the research and development facility as well, all of those. Let me just say something about, I spent a lot of time on business reforms in the last I spent a long time on business reforms in the lower house, and I had gone to the population to give the details because there are so many. We are working on the big ticket items which you did not work on. Big ticket items. I'll tell you this now. Absolutely not. The business reforms. So the aim is, so I can tell you, sorry, that the doing business report came out. We are on an unchanged position at 105, which is not good. But I can tell you that we are focusing on the big ticket items, and they know that, on paying taxes, the game changers, the construction permitting process, for which a pilot will be rolled out in November of this year, right? And just let me mention the investment activity. If over the last 4 years, there have been total investments, and those are the ones that we contract, of $4.7 billion, creating 1,455 jobs. That is under our stewardship. And in the pipeline, we have another $2.8 billion, creating 1,653 jobs. Those are the figures that they don't want to attach themselves to. I can understand how you feel. So here we are. Mr. Vice President, I know my time is there. We are about, at this time, implementing. We have sound plans, implementing and impacting the good people of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Teemal.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice President, for the opportunity to contribute on this debate and act to provide for service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on 30th day of September 2020. Mr. Vice President, in the budget presentation, the Minister of Finance in the area of flood alleviation said that a comprehensive strategy for treating with drainage and flooding throughout the country was being presented. And in his presentation, mentioned a number of desilting projects and highlighted a mark of success that there was no flooding in Greenville and the European housing developments with the recent passage of Tropical Storm Karen as a signal of the success of the drainage program, flood alleviation program. Also within that budget statement, brief mention was made about some measures being taken in the Port of Spain area to alleviate the flooding around the lighthouse area and lower areas of Port of Spain. Mr. Vice President, I would like to respectfully submit that what was outlined in that budget presentation are at best short-term measures to cope with flood alleviation and would really not solve the long-term challenges of flooding that the country faces from year to year. Mr. Vice President, from the period 2008 to 2015, several studies were undertaken by different administrations. Just to highlight a few, in 2008, consultancy services for flood mitigation and integrated watershed management project for the North Oropouche River Basin. In 2009, Ottawa River Basin flood mitigation and integrated watershed management project. 2011, Caroni River Basin study. 2015, the South Oropouche River Basin study that for some reason was not fully completed. And all of this was a cost to taxpayers of probably around $52 million cumulatively. Within these studies, what we find is that due to the very high capital costs for mitigation and alleviation measures identified, with the exception of desilting and some embankment development and installation of pump and gates in some areas, most of the recommendations within these studies have not been implemented over the many years. And some of the major recommendations for medium-term to long-term solutions for flood alleviation would include construction of sediment traps, construction of retention dams, and an entire system where automation of sluice gates would be implemented, as well as extensive installation of pumping stations in critical catchments throughout the country. The Minister of Works, in his address yesterday, Mr. Vice President, did express that there are studies and studies and studies and studies and little action. But I think coming out of all these studies over the many years, in fact, decades of these drainage studies, is that these projects are really very, very high capital cost projects. And for some reason, past governments have not found, have not had the determination and the means to invest the billions of dollars that are necessary to address long-term flood alleviation. And the programs that are necessary continue to be grossly underfunded, as I said, for decades.
Mr. Teemal, can we make an intervention here, please, if you don't mind? As a former Minister of Works, these studies, in my humble opinion, they only focus on civil engineering solution to geomorphological and hydrological conditions. And that's the problem, billions of dollars. We have to look for softer solution that is more geo-oriented than civil engineering oriented. I'm sorry if you're a civil engineer.
My comment is taken with Minister, but in addition to the civil engineering solutions, a lot of these studies are very holistic in that they look at hydrology, the hydraulics, and particularly in the context of sediment transport, sediment control, sediment generation, and all of those things. I think a few of them, amount of those studies, have addressed those matters as well. And I agree with you. They really call for very, very high capital costs. And I think governments of the past have been reluctant to really shoulder the necessary responsibilities to generate the necessary funding to undertake these projects to address not the short term, but the medium to long term solutions to flood alleviation. Mr. Vice President, it is therefore no surprise that as a country, we have grown accustomed to a certain culture when it comes to flood alleviation and flood mitigation measures. And I would like to refer to it as a culture of desilting and box drain construction, because this was what we have been seeing over decades. And desilting, yes, because we spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year in desilting. And there are also studies that show our desilting practices need to be looked at very carefully, because popular desilting practices is just to put the excavating equipment there, scoop up the sediment from the channel, put it onto the embankment, and when the next flood comes, all the sediment goes back into. And this is what we are expending a lot of money every year, unfortunately, into. And, well, box drain seems to have been the solution for all of our problems over the years. It became very popular at a certain point in time that I won't define, but it seems as though even the public was saying, what do you want for your community? I want a box drain. Like if the box drain became the salve for all of our flooding situations. And in fact, box drains would be installed in areas where there is right-of-way and available land space, when the box drain is known to basic engineering students as the most inefficient channel section for dealing with flood water. And the most efficient section is, of course, the trapezoidal section for the drain. But yet still we enter, and it is more economical to construct trapezoidal channels rather than box drains. But yet still we are investing millions of dollars into this box drain construction from year to year. Yes, I understand the frustration with studies after studies after studies, and as Honorable Minister Khan pointed out, maybe the studies are skewed for civil engineering solutions, but at the same time, you know, the effects of climate change, weather patterns have changed tremendously, and rainfall intensities, patterns have changed, and what we see, changes in land use, changes in commercial and residential developments, and a lot of illegal and unregulated developments. And the combined effect of those changes do warrant that we revisit these drainage studies that have been done in the past. In addition, we are not complete in this regard nationally, and there are certain studies in certain areas of Trinidad that have not been undertaken in the past and needs to be done. The Northwest Peninsula, Central West Catchment, and urban drainage studies in critical areas, town areas such as the South Oropouche River Basin and the city of Port of Spain. Mr. Vice President, as I said, it's understandable for governments to shy away from implementing these very high capital flood mitigation measures. Generally, there's a lack of information on the real cost of floods for proper quantification and the adverse impact of the economy. This is not difficult thus it is difficult, Mr. Vice President, to establish the financial feasibility, the economic feasibility for justification of capital works related to long-term flood management strategies. And it is imperative that we establish this study in order to be able to secure funding on the basis of economic justification to undertake long-term measures to alleviate flooding in our country. I think our government has recognized this because in a response I understand in Cabinet Minute number 13 of September 17, 2015, where Cabinet agreed to the formal adoption of the official policy framework of the Government of Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. One of the priorities of this policy includes the implementation of a comprehensive drainage plan. And our Minister of Works, when he was delivering making his contribution yesterday, did inform this House that CAF, through grant funding, is seeking to pull this comprehensive national drainage plan together. And also in Vision 2030, in which it is clearly identified that an integrated flood management plan is envisaged within Vision 2020. So I think it's heartening to see the recognition of the need to pull all of these things together, particularly in terms of long-term flood alleviation mitigation measures. It is absolutely necessary. And I trust that the government, when all of this comes together, that the billions of dollars that will be required to enter into these capital projects does not serve as a deterrent, as it has had over the decades, and that we as a country can embrace and secure and seek funding on the economical feasibility of these major capital works, and we see it come to pass in the years to come. Mr. Vice President, I would just like to share some thoughts on the matter of transportation. And we see within the budget, mention is made of San Fernando to Port of Spain Highway, the Valencia to Toco Roadway, Churchill Roosevelt Highway extension to Manzanilla, Creep Interchange, and we heard from the Minister of Works yesterday of several more projects. Mr. Vice President, notwithstanding these projects running into, again, billions of dollars, Trinidad and Tobago has a relatively well-developed highway and main road system. But however, we still have a very high per capita vehicle ownership of approximately 500 vehicles per 1,000 persons in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, ranks among the highest in the world. And despite all of these highly capital-intensive highway and road network construction, it is most likely that traffic congestion would continue to be an issue and a problem, particularly in urban areas of Trinidad and Tobago. And we need to look at policies which encourage high vehicle occupancy and development of a mass transit system. Mr. Vice President, the intention to increase the PTSC bus fleet by 300 buses, again, it's a very, very noble objective. I think it is a responsibility of any country to ensure a good mass transit system that brings affordable means of transport to the citizens of a country. And it is good that we are looking to increase the fleet, the bus fleet, to PTSC. Mr. Vice President, in March of 2016, consultants from the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, conducted a high-level strategic analysis of potential mass transit alternatives to implement in the East-West corridor and the North-South transit corridors. And the consultants of the IDB concluded that a BRT PBR, a bus rapid transit and priority bus route system, is the best bus-based mass transit alternative that there is. In January of 2017, the consultants' recommendation were received by the Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago Transport Committee, and they recommended immediate implementation of this bus rapid transit PBR mass transit system. And in May 2017, the same APET Transport Committee also submitted to the Ministry of Planning and Development a document which detailed a conceptual design of a mass transit system for the East-West corridor. The same documents were later submitted to the Ministry of Works and Transport. But in addition to the supplementation of buses to the PTSC, I think it is imperative that we look, in conjunction with that increase in buses, we look at the implementation of this mass transit system so that the increase in buses, we can derive maximum benefits from this increase in buses. Mr. Vice President, also within the transportation sector, there is no single institution responsible for the overall planning, management, and regulation of the public transportation sector. PTSA right now, just over 200 buses per day, 11 million passengers per year, and over 300 million TT dollars in subsidies. The private sector forms the bulk of the public transportation system of almost 75%, 13,000 privately owned 47 passenger cars, 5,925 passenger maxi taxis, and they all carry an estimated 43 million passengers per year, and this is growing. And also an unknown number of PH taxis participating, particularly on the rural roads, to fill the deficiencies that are there in the public transportation system. In several documents submitted to governments over the past years, including a National Internal Transportation Policy in 1996, Vision 2020 Infrastructure Committee draft final report in 2004, and a framework for the implementation of National Transportation Project 2010, all recommended the establishment of a transit authority. And it is heartening to note that as part of the Vision 2020, the government has identified the establishment of the Transit Authority. But, Mr. Vice President, I have not seen within the presentations, the PSIP, nor the budget allocations, any mention of this, the establishment of a Transit Authority. It's a step in the right direction. We need to bear in mind that the billions of dollars being spent on transportation projects falls within a sustainable transportation development plan. The UN Commission on Sustainable Development, Mr. Vice President, identifies 6 pillars for sustainable transport development. And one of the key pillars is integrated land use transportation planning. Some of the signs of poor land use transportation planning are clearly visible every day. That is the traffic congestion, illegal and unregulated development, and several other signs. Mr. President, I note that Vision 2030 of the government identifies a national transportation plan, and the Minister of Works did mention that a national transportation plan is to be presented to Cabinet very shortly. But I'd just like to add that that transportation plan, in keeping with the sustainable development goals of, as enumerated by the United Nations, is that we look at it being integrated with land use, so that effectively we have an integrated land use transportation planning plan as per the sustainable development goals. Mr. Vice President, I would like to come to the question of water security. The projects noted in the budget, again, brings to mind a similar scenario that has existed over decades, particularly with regard to the Water and Sewerage Authority. Mr. Vice President, I had the opportunity to serve on the board of WASA probably almost 18 years ago. And what I see represented in the budget is the same, almost the same, based on the same lines and principles as of 18 and 20 years ago. It's a question of leaks and fixing of leaks, a question of desilting dams, a question of rehabilitation of water treatment plants, and it's like the same model that is there for decades and decades. And notwithstanding the expenditure of billions and billions of dollars over the decades, the country is still in a situation where over 50% of our population receive a supply of water less than 3 days a week. It is not a success story. And as a country, I'm positive that collectively we can do a lot better than this with regards to our situation with water. We have been faced with this situation, as I said, for quite some time. And it's the same old, same old. Mr. Vice President, whenever there is a prolonged dry, wet season, we don't get much rain during a wet season. And what follows is an extended dry season to combine with that dry, wet season. We are in the situation of having to ration water because the levels in our dams keep dropping, expectedly so. And I ask the question, if we have 2 years of consecutive patterns of dry, wet seasons and extended dry seasons, or maybe even 3 years, as a country, what is our position with regards to water? Because we are in trouble with just one extended dry season and one dry, wet season. I just would like to contemplate such a situation coming. But because of changing climate patterns in the world, varying rainfall patterns, it is a possibility that is right on our doorstep. It may not be too far away. And this rationing of water has become a way of life. We have grown accustomed to it. And we need to move further than that. And again, it is heartening to see in Vision 2030 that there is mention of an integrated water resources management plan, because we have to look at water security and ensuring that despite changing climatic conditions, despite physical conditions and all the constraints we have with regards to water, that we can ensure that our population has access to water despite all of these changes. And it is a step in the right direction. I support it, Integrated Water Resources Management Plan. But again, what I'm not seeing in the PSIP, nor within the budget itself, the details are not there as to when this is going to be done. And I would strongly recommend that the government give consideration, bring this to the front burner. Let it be done. Let it be part of your critical, essential planning that has to be done so that water security for the nation, we stand a good chance in the years to come. Mr. Vice President, I would just like to get away a bit from the infrastructure issues that I've raised and the infrastructure matters. And I would like to just spend a little time reflecting on the VAT refund debt that a proposal was made in the budget to address. It's stated that VAT arrears to the business community stands at $4.5 billion. And it's an accumulated debt, okay, that is also noted. But, Mr. Vice President, the proposal to deal with this long outstanding debt, I think needs to be looked at very carefully. The business community really needs that stimulation to make its contribution to revitalization of the economy. And if we don't have a vibrant business community with access to ready financing, it really affects the ability of the businesses to generate economic activity. And I wonder how the business community thinks about this, because we see a budget in which probably close to $5 billion is going to be spent on capital projects. And here you have a debt that is not going to be settled, in the short term. And it's like someone owing you money, and you see them going outside there and building a lot of things, spending money profusely, and telling you, it's okay, it is necessary for me to spend that money, but the money I owe you, you have to wait until. It doesn't send a good signal at all for government as a debtor on the whole. For such an approach to be taken, I humbly suggest, I submit. Mr. Vice President, the proposed VAT bonds are 1.5% per annum. Mr. Vice President, the businesses who have been waiting on these VAT returns for years, over 5 years, they have managed to survive by overdraft facilities, increasing overdraft facilities. And those overdraft facilities, when you increase, we all know, it's like about 2% above prime. So you are talking about 12 to 15%. In addition, some of them would have taken short-term loans with the intention that they would receive the money and settle the loans. And those loans would be at least 6% to 8%, or probably more. And here we have, in settlement of the debt, we are offering that community 1.5% per annum. So already, there's a massive loss to the businesses awaiting these tax returns. In addition to that, the bonds, most likely when you go to the banks with them and financial institutions, those bonds are going to be discounted. And effectively, the paying off of this debt, the dollar value may be just 50% of what is really being owed to the businesses at the end of the day. I am humbly suggesting to the government that reconsideration be given to the settlement of this debt, that part of the debt be given in cash. I'm not whether 25, 35%, 50, whatever, but some part of this debt should be paid off in cash to those who are being owed. And maybe the remainder of it, part of it, could go into bonds, but not at 1.5%. I think we need to do a lot better than that. The rate needs to reflect, the losses that the businesses have accumulated over the years, waiting for this to be paid. Mr. Vice President, in the remaining time I have, I'd just like to also look at the health and the healthcare sector. And in particular, we see mention being made of the various hospitals, Arima, Point 14, Sangre Grande, Port of Spain, Central Block. And it is good to see the plans for the Cuba Medical and Health Training Facility. Again, it's a step in the right direction. But the budget has been silent on the National Oncology Center that we understand is now scrapped. Mr. Vice President, the establishment of the Oncology Center was promised as far back as October 2002 by former Prime Minister Patrick Manning when he read the 2002-2003 national budget. And here we are, some 16 years later, and 2 administrations in and out of office. The center is still incomplete. Mr. Vice President, cost of construction initially was estimated at $150 million and was put at $800 million in the year 2012. When completed, the center was expected to offer cancer patients and their families several services, including MRI scanning, diagnostic and radiation with shielded treatment bunkers, etc. And really, it was to become a state-of-the-art facility, giving hope to the over 3,000 cancer patients that we have to deal with in Trinidad and Tobago. So, Vice President, I am quoting from Sunday Guardian article dated Sunday the 5th, 2012 by Rhonda Ramberley, in which it is stated that in June 2012, at a breakfast meeting to discuss the National Oncology Center, former Health Minister Dr. Fuad Khan said that the total cost of construction of the center was $663 million, with an additional $52 million for equipment. At that time, it was said construction was expected to be 18 months, and commissioning of major equipment expected to be an additional 6 months. He said that the start of construction was November 12, 2012, and opening and operation of the center scheduled for November 2014. Mr. Vice President, Chairman of UDICOT, Noel Garcia, fast forward to 2018, told the Sunday Guardian the center was one of those projects that seemed to be plagued by issues and that would not allow it to go forward. Work was expected to restart in full within the next month, and the cost was expected to be around $573 million, $227 million less than the figure put forward in 2012. Mr. Garcia said it has been about 15 years now, and we have had many administrations, but I have committed that one of the tasks that I have is the completion of the center. And he gave November 2018 as a new deadline for completion. We are confident that all things being equal, we should be up and running towards the end of 2018. Mr. Vice President, in early 2019, the present government signaled its intention to remove the intended equipment from the National Oncology Center and place it into various institutions. Mr. Vice President, what concerns me is that here we have a vital center that would provide hope and treatment to patients suffering from one of the dreaded diseases of cancer. And for 16 years as a country, we just cannot complete this center. And the nation, I think, deserves to know, one, why we cannot deliver a project after 16 years, and two, how much monies that we have spent thus far on this abandoned center. Not from the point of view of witch hunting, Mr. Vice President, but we need to be accountable to our citizens. And accountability, including the fact that we can clearly identify why we could not get a project correct.
Senator, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you. Why we could not get a project correct for 16 years, so that for the future, as a country, we do not repeat those mistakes. We do not repeat those mistakes. Mr. Vice President, we are a country rich with expertise in the project management and construction industry. We have seen projects and mega projects in this country successfully completed over the years. But what is of concern is the failure of past administrations to really come to the public and say, well, this is the situation with this project. Look, we have made a massive mistake. Draw the line, rather than giving hope to the many, many cancer patients over the years. Well, we are going to fix it, and we are going to fix it, and we are going to fix it. And I think that there has to be some form of investigation into why we were not able to give the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago this particular project. Mr. Vice President, I thank you.
Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for giving me the opportunity to contribute to the debate in this August House and to report on the work of the Office of the Prime Minister, Tobago Affairs, fondly known as Central Administrative Services, Tobago. It is a pleasure for me to be in the Upper House today to share with the national public some of the developments that have occurred in Tobago through the work of central government and the Tobago House of Assembly. Mr. Vice President, as a child, I would have had cause to make somewhat regular trips to the doctor. And one thing I learned early on is that a good doctor will never administer medication without first thoroughly examining the patient. This government, Mr. Vice President, led by Dr. the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley, like any good physician, has evaluated the social and economic conditions of our beloved country and administered the relevant course of treatment that will set Trinidad and Tobago firmly on a path of renewed stability, strength, and growth. Mr. Vice President, it is well known that all medications have associated side effects, but all medication ultimately brings some measure of relief to the patient. Our nation, in the hands of a team of physicians with the skills, determination, and character to administer the bitter pill required for healing and transformation, has seen meaningful growth and transformation. Today, we can see and feel effects of sharing the burden of adjustment, but the sacrifices have not been in vain. Our economy is turning around and is projected to grow. We have been able to do more with less. We are seeing a paradigm shift, and we are well on the way towards the creation of a new society, a new Trinidad and Tobago, where accountability, integrity, transparency in public office is no longer an exception, but the rule. And I want to commend the Honorable Prime Minister for leading this transformation process, Mr. Vice President. The Central Administrative Services Tobago plays a critical role in Tobago's development, ensuring that the services of the Office of the Prime Minister are available on the island, and is responsible for supporting all central government agencies in Tobago. This mandate is executed under 3 main sections: administrative services, which include the Treasury, the Weights and Measures Inspectorate, General Services, Finance and Accounting, Information Communication Technology, Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation Unit, Human Resource, Internal Audit and Communications Unit, the Meteorological Services, which provides a reliable data on weather and other environmental conditions for aviation and the public, the Registrar General Department, which provides a range of services to the public for the registration of births, marriages, death, business, land, and other legal recordings. Mr. Vice President, although the Tobago House of Assembly is the main driver of development on the island of Tobago, through the respectful collaboration and meaningful partnership with central government, we have seen the people and the island of Tobago benefit significantly from the national resources over the last 4 years. Through the Office of the Prime Minister's Central Administrative Services alone, Tobagonians have benefited from improved service delivery, creation of opportunities for our youth, social intervention geared towards improving the circumstances of some of the most vulnerable on the island, strengthening of our third sector, the voluntary sector. The Office of the Prime Minister, Central Administrative Services Tobago, has made a notable impact on delivering its budgeted goals. Through the implementation of an asset and stores inventory management system at the head office, we have been able to realize greater efficiency in service delivery and more accountability. The people of Tobago now have a renewed sense of national pride and appreciation of the importance of what it means for us to be a part of this, what we call the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Through the reintroduction of the Republic Day route march to the streets of Roxborough in 2017, after 2 decades-long absence, the people of Tobago and the people of Tobago East now have a better understanding and appreciation of what it means to be a part of this republic we call the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. In 2019, an award segment was introduced to honor the contributions of Tobagonians in the field of education, tourism and hospitality, finance, community development, and youth development. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Honorable Minister of National Security and his Permanent Secretary and the officers of the various divisions within the national security portfolio for their support. For the first time this year, we were able to have officers of various detachments of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force participating in the route march, and it was well received by all the spectators and the people of Tobago. And again, I say thank you to the Minister of National Security. Mr. Vice President, in our efforts to support youth development on the island and complement the work of the Gender and Child Affairs Division of the Office of the Prime Minister, approximately 70 secondary school students from across Tobago benefited from the forum to commemorate International Women's Day. These young students had the opportunity to interact with youth influencers from across various disciplines. They were able to interact with young entrepreneurs from across Trinidad and Tobago, persons involved in business, persons involved in fashion, persons involved in different types of industry. And what would have emerged was that our participants, our young students, would have been more empowered and motivated to go out and seek their own different options and opportunities for their own personal development, and to link with what we call influencers to become more motivated to follow their dreams. So, Mr. Vice President, I want to thank the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs Division, I want to thank the Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs for partnering with the Office of the Prime Minister, Central Administrative Services Tobago, for offering students of Tobago the opportunity to sit and meet with influencers and to learn from them. At that session, we had a motivational talk from Mrs. Sharon Clark Rowley, the wife of the Honorable Prime Minister, and that was well received by the over 70 secondary school students who would have participated in that forum in Tobago. Mr. Vice President, with the exception of the July-August holidays this year, every other year since CAS would have been reintroduced, we would have hosted young girls from the St. Jude's Girls' Home in Trinidad. They come to Tobago for a few days during the school vacation period, and during that time, we would host them at the Office of the Prime Minister, Central Administrative Services Tobago, have an opportunity to bond with the girls, as well as link them with other NGOs and youth groups on the island of Tobago for them to do voluntary projects. And the last year, what was really significant and meaningful to the young girls from St. Jude's was that the day they came to CAS, the Honorable Prime Minister was at his office in Tobago. So they had the opportunity to interact with the Prime Minister, having shared his experiences with them, have the opportunity to bond one-on-one with the Honorable Prime Minister, and to recognize and realize that the Prime Minister is indeed working in the best interest of all children of Trinidad and Tobago, including the young girls in our vulnerable young girls in our institutions such as St. Jude's. Mr. Vice President, while the THA is doing its work to empower young people in Tobago, and while we at the Office of the Prime Minister, Central Administrative Services will do our part to help to support the efforts of the Tobago House of Assembly, we recognize how important it is for us to have all hands on deck for us to transform Tobago and to create opportunities for Tobagonians. So, Mr. Vice President, our work with youth did not only stay in terms of providing opportunities for motivation and motivational talks. What we would have done through the Office of the Prime Minister, Central Administrative Services Tobago, is that we would have provided an opportunity for 78 secondary and tertiary level students to benefit from our school vocation employment program. What we would have done is that we would have established a facility where during the July-August vacation, we would create internship opportunities for young Tobagonians to get on-the-job training. We know that it is often difficult for persons to gain entry into the world of work, and most times they ask for experience. But if you don't have the opportunities for them to gain the experience, it is difficult for them. OJT is doing its part, THA is doing its part. At CAS, we would have stepped in during the July-August holiday period to create internship opportunities at our various divisions. And what we did, we didn't just cater for tertiary level students, university students. We would have worked with young children, young students who are going from 5th form to 6th form, lower 6 to upper 6, give them the opportunity as well to be part of the internship program so they could help to discover what it is that they would like to do when they leave school, what areas of service they want to enter into. And thus far, we have been able to service 78 young persons in Tobago. And I want to commend the team at CAS and our different departments for ensuring that while the young people come to our organization, that they have a holistic experience and they're able to become well-rounded individuals. Mr. Vice President, over 100 students would have also participated and benefited from our various outreach in Tobago. We had our open day, our open house, as well as our career fair, and we also had the observance of World Meteorological Day. What we recognize is that a lot of young people in Tobago would often gravitate towards traditional jobs. Through the observance of World Meteorological Day, we have been creating opportunity for children as young as those in the early childhood centers to get the opportunity to visit our office at Met or Met office, see what is done, and explore different opportunities for employment there. And what we are also using this to do is to help to generate interest in STEMs so that we could foster greater interest among young people, especially our young girls in STEM subjects. So we're using World Met Day as an opportunity to create that awareness. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the officers at our Met office in Tobago for their support in helping us to realize that goal. To support the efforts of the THA to hone the talent of our athletes, Over 25 elite athletes benefited from the gym facilities and instructors located at OPM Cast. This provided great relief to the athletes while the Dwight York Stadium was being renovated. Mr. Vice President, if you're Tobagoan as well, you are often on the island, you would know that for a period of time, the Dwight York Stadium wasn't accessible to the public. And we have a number of young budding athletes in Tobago who would have needed access to gym facility to help to maintain themselves during the season and sometimes outside of season. We have a state-of-the-art gym at the Office of the Prime Minister, Central Administrative Services, Tobago, and we have qualified instructors there. So athletes were able to access the services of the instructors, use the equipment, and help to maintain themselves even while the Dwight York Stadium was being renovated. And, you know, I'm seeing where a number of young persons would have benefited from it. We are seeing where young Tobagonians are medaling, be it in Special Olympics or other regional games, and I want to commend those young Tobagonians who would have utilized the services and would have seen the fruits by medaling, Mr. Vice President. In terms of our support in developing the third sector, what we call the voluntary sector, the Office of the Prime Minister, through our cabinet-approved grant funding committee, would have been able to assess and approve over 100 grant applications to individuals and organizations, that is voluntary groups operating in Tobago. What we recognize is that for Tobago to develop, it doesn't require just the role of government and the THA, but it requires all of Tobago getting involved. And by helping to fund projects and programs coming out from the third sector, the voluntary sector, by helping to empower them to do what they have to do, we are helping to build Tobago together. And I would like to commend those organizations that would have accessed the grant funding opportunities available at CAST and would have implemented their projects and their programs and would have made a significant impact on the lives of Tobagonians. Mr. Vice President, additionally, OPN CAST has been able to continue to support residents who have been referred by the public health system on the island to institutions in Trinidad for medical treatment by way of covering for the patient and a chaperone once the cost is not being covered by the THA or the TRHA. And we have a facility at OPM Cast where persons in Tobago who have to come to Trinidad to seek medical attention, once they are referred by the Tobago House of Assembly Relevant Division or TRHA, and they aren't able to access the funding to cover the cost of the airline ticket to come to Trinidad, there's a facility available at CAST that Tobagonians could benefit from, and Tobagonians have been accessing that. So we have also been assisting in Tobago to help Tobagonians to meet their medical needs. So I want to commend again the staff at OPM CAST, General Administration Department, who have been ensuring that persons coming to access that funding opportunity get the necessary releases on time to be able to book tickets and get to Trinidad on time to seek medical attention. In March 2017, a workstation was established at the Registrar General Division for the public to electronically search the Land Registry for documents registered under the Deeds of Bills of Sales Act. And in February 2019, electronic searches for the Land Registry was expanded to include documents registered under the Real Property Act. Mr. Vice President, in January 2019, the Registrar General Division commenced receiving payments via links machines, thus reducing the burden of having to present exact cash amounts for transactions. As simple as it may appear, this was a great relief to many. I know of my own personal experience of going to do business at the Registrar General Department and not having the correct amount of cash, having to leave, go back, and you know how it is in Tobago. It's a trek if you don't have transportation to go leave downtown to go back uptown. But now that they're accepting links payment, it brings relief not only to senior citizens, but to young mothers who may have babies in arms when going to register, and also persons who may have disability, not having to traverse up and down Scarborough to get money to go back to do their business, but being able to pay directly by links, and that is a benefit to the Tobagonians, and I want to commend the Registrar General Department for that. Mr. Vice President, during the period of October 2016 to September 2019, the Office of the Registrar General collected $260,885 in revenue from the extended products and services offered to the members of the public. Even though it might just be just over $3 million, it shows that we are indeed contributing to the national coffers, Mr. Vice President, so I wanted to note that. Mr. Vice President, before speaking to some of the key achievements of the Tobago House of Assembly and the development projects earmarked for Tobago, I will briefly speak to the plans of the Office of the Prime Minister, Central Administrative Services for 2020. Over the next fiscal year, the Central Administrative Services Tobago plans to strengthen the internal capacity of the department as it relates to the flow of information and security, and to invest in equipment that will improve the monitoring of weather systems to allow for more efficient aviation operations at the Ayanna Robinson International Airport. These projects include computerization and networking, where the proposed project will involve the implementation of hardware and software to manage the recording and the flow of information throughout the various departments and the improvement of security at the main office building. We will seek to improve accountability by outfitting and installation of asset and stores inventory management system at the subdivision offices, while improving service delivery by further upgrading our registry file tracking system through the use of radio frequency identification, otherwise called RFID, or alternative technology. This will address one of the shortcomings identified in past reports from the Auditor General's Office, where issues of asset management and file tracking were identified for OPM costs. Through this particular project, we are going to address that need to improve and strengthen our internal controls. The meteorological services will continue to finalize the acquisition and operationalization of automated weather observing system. This system provides measurement of all parameters which may be needed for safe operations at the airport, including but not limited to approaching, landing, and takeoff. It provides critical information, especially wind shear, which is prevalent at the A&R Robinson International Airport, and has the ability to relay this information directly to the cockpit of the aircraft. The system also provides automatic runway visual range information to the aircraft and will be an added layer of safety for aviation interests. Mr. Vice President, the Office of the Prime Minister, Central Administrative Services, Tobago, will continue to do all it is empowered to do for the people of Tobago without contravention of the THA Act. We will continue to be that support agent of the state in Tobago and work with all for the betterment of the people of Tobago and the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Vice President, I will now turn my attention to the Tobago House of Assembly. I want to commend the Honorable Minister of Finance and the Minister of Planning and Development for what I consider to be a fair allocation to the people of Tobago and the Tobago House of Assembly. Tobago's allocation of $2.229 billion represents 4.30% of the national budget. $1.979 billion is allocated for recurrent expenditure, $231.63 million for capital expenditure, and $80 million for the unemployment relief program. Mr. Vice President, based on the creditworthiness of the THA and the Minister of Finance granting approval for the THA to utilize bond financing up to $300 million, the Tobago House of Assembly will be able to access funds for critical projects on the island. This will go a long way in helping to improve the island's development plan agenda. And on behalf of the people of Tobago, I say thank you to the Minister of Finance, thank you to the Minister of Planning and Development, and thank you to our Honorable Prime Minister. But Mr. Vice President, that is not all that Tobago can expect. Through the work of various ministries and government agencies, Tobago will benefit from an additional $2 billion in direct investment on the island. In reality, Mr. Vice President, Tobago will directly benefit from over $4 billion, and that is commendable. Central government's commitment to the people of Tobago is demonstrated through the acquisition of 2 new fast ferries for the sea bridge. When delivered, these vessels will greatly improve the efficiency of the sea bridge. The commencement of a project to establish a breakwater system at Magdalena Grand, along with the planned construction of the new terminal building, will not only attract more flights to Tobago, but improve Tobago's tourism product and help to attract investment by big brand hotels. Mr. Vice President, the launch of 2 Coast Guard high-speed interceptors on the island of Tobago signaled a new era of border security and brought comfort to fisherfolk on the island. The new Sherburne Road Police Station and the construction of the Roxborough Police Station and Fire Station will improve safety and security on the island. These are but a few of the projects being done through central government agencies in Tobago. And through these projects and the host of other projects on the island, central government has shown that the people of Tobago are valued, the people of Tobago are loved, and the people of Tobago will always bloom under the hands of a PNM central government. These projects, Mr. Vice President, demonstrate the high regard for the people of Tobago and the close working relationship between the THA and central government. A far cry from what we, the people of Tobago, experienced during the period 2010 to 2015. Mr. Vice President, during the last fiscal, every division of the Tobago House of Assembly was able to take Tobago further along the road of development. In terms of agriculture, a revised allocation of $32.4 million was provided to facilitate the development of the agricultural sector. This allocation realized the enhancement of the island's capacity for food security. At the Lear and Corland Estate, 4.88 hectares was cultivated with various crops such as dasheen, pigeon peas, and sweet potatoes. 3,700 cassava sticks, 1,405 sweet potato slips, approximately 1,941 pineapple plants, and 175 banana suckers were made available to farmers in Tobago. At the Louisdor Nursery, 5,562 fruit and orchard crops, 8,441 ornamentals, and 2,286 crates of seedlings were sold to the public. In the last fiscal, 27 access roads were completed by 15 contractors, thus providing access to more fertile land for crop cultivation. And the Scarborough Abattoir was upgraded at a cost of $0.6 million, and the remodeling of the Scarborough Market occurred at a cost of $10.4 million. Mr. Vice President, agriculture is important to the people of Tobago. Food security is important to the people of Tobago. First, to ensure that we have access to food, first to ensure that the sector is able to thrive, we must put the support framework in place. And through the opening of the access roads, through the distribution of seedlings and suckers, through the upgrade of the market and the abattoir, we are putting the framework in place to help to boost the agriculture sector. And I want to commend the Tobago House of Assembly for making wise use of the money allocated for them for agriculture in Tobago. Mr. Vice President, in terms of infrastructure development, I would just like to highlight a few things. In terms of street lighting, 34 street lights were installed in 8 communities at a cost of $274,196.50 in Tobago. Road rehabilitation works were done in areas such as Windward Road, Richmond, Windward Road, Argyle, Goldfinch, Susulands, and Pleasant Prospect Trace. Additionally, the Claude Noel Highway was upgraded and resurfacing work was done for the segment between Orange Hill and Rockley Vale at a cost of $38 million. Outside of that work done in terms of infrastructure, I would like to highlight the work that was done to help to secure the communities that exist along the seafront. Places such as Roxborough, hanging down in Betsy Soap, Argyle, where homes were being threatened by erosion, a lot of work was done to help to protect the coastline. And we're seeing where now a lot of families and businesses are more comfortable knowing that their properties are no longer under threat. And I want to thank the Secretary for the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and the Environment for the hard work that he is doing to help to secure the coastline in Tobago. I also want to highlight the work of the Studley Park quarry under its new management and in its new creation and formation. That quarry is producing quality material, not only for use in Tobago, but for use in Trinidad and for use throughout the region. I am seeing where rocks coming out of my constituency, because Studley Park is in Tobago East, rocks coming out from my constituency coming to Trinidad to help to stabilize shorelines in Trinidad. So I want to really commend the Studley Park Quarry and the management for the work they are doing. I also want to highlight the work that is being done to improve healthcare in Tobago. In Roxborough, the sod was turned for the construction of a new hospital. This would go a long way in helping to ease the minds of people in places such as Lansford and Castara and Palatuvere and Charlottesville, who traditionally would have had to traverse all the way to Scarborough. Once the facility is completed, it will bring great relief to Tobagonians living in the East, particularly women of childbearing age. I remember when I was campaigning, a number of women would have said that a challenge for them is when it's time to give birth, they have to leave their home and go out to a community closer to the hospital for sometimes a week in advance to prepare, because getting from Hermitage to Signal Hill would take some time and you might have a baby on the road. So I want to really commend the central government and the THA for making the Roxborough Hospital a priority project. I also want to speak to public transportation in terms of what is being done to improve the PTSC service in Tobago. The management and staff of PTSC would have collaborated with the Tobago House of Assembly and with the elected representatives to ensure that the service delivery is improved. Coming out from various consultations and discussions with PTSC, we have seen where places such as Lansome and Castara will now have a better, more reliable, predictable bus service for the communities. Additionally, they would have recently reintroduced the Harbour Master Service, which is a late-night service from Scarborough to those rural communities that would benefit persons who not only work outside in Scarborough, but young persons who go to school in Scarborough and those other communities, so that they will get back home safely through the bus service in the community. I also want to note that in terms of border control and our security on land and sea, when the Minister of National Security came to Tobago to launch the 2 high-speed interceptors, he also took the opportunity to do a walk through Charlottesville, and we would have highlighted certain services that needed to be upgraded, as well as certain action that needs to be taken to help to improve the delivery of healthcare in Charlottesville. So a decision was taken by the Minister of National Security to have his agents move out of the facility that is currently housing immigration, that is the Charlottesville Health Facility. The THA would have provided a building for them, so they'll be moving into that facility. And the Charlottesville Health Facility will be used for its purpose, which is the delivery of health care. And that is being done because there's meaningful collaboration, again, between central government and the Tobago House of Assembly. In terms of education, we are seeing where the THA is moving towards improving the whole delivery of education in Tobago and helping to empower our teachers as well as our students. This year, Tobago would have done remarkably well, having some of our students placed in the top 200 and the top 100 nationally, and I want to commend the THA for the work they are doing by providing those remedial services for students who are not successful, by providing a training facility for teachers so that they could get in-service training in Tobago. We are working towards building the next generation of Tobagonians so that they are more empowered and more equipped to take Tobago forward on this journey of development. Mr. Vice President, life in Tobago isn't perfect, but life in Tobago is good. And it is good because as Tobagonians, we remain resilient and committed and focused on the development of our island and our nation. We will continue to face challenges, but we'll always overcome them because we are very firm and steadfast in our belief that we as a people, we can achieve and do all that we set our minds to. So as we embrace the opportunity provided to us through the allocation in this budget, we look to the future with hope. We look to the future with a firm belief that Tobago will continue to bloom, continue to blossom, continue to prosper under this administration. Mr. Vice President, I thank you.
Senator Haynes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. It is indeed my pleasure to contribute on this, the last debate on the budget, on a budget from this Keith Rowley administration. The country is on the verge of breathing a sigh of relief, Mr. Vice President. The feeling is palpable that the end of their tenure is near. Trinidad and Tobago is about to wake up from the end of a 4-year nightmare. Yes. Now, Mr. Vice President, it was during a budget response in the House of Representatives this year that the government saw it fit to rush and call a local government elections. We can only hope. We can only hope. Yeah, yes, and we do want you to call the elections. You're very right. And so it is our hope that at some point in time, today or tomorrow, they'll rush quickly and call the general election. Call the general election. I know the Minister of Labour, the Minister of Labour, I see, is particularly excited for an election. So excited that she put her resignation in before the population. You put the population. She did what the population. She did what the population. Just one. Okay.
You're ready to go home.
So again, we have gotten to a point where the crosstalk on the floor is above the voice of the member contributing. When that happens, I cannot hear the person speaking, and therefore it becomes very difficult to preside. As such, be mindful of the level of the crosstalk so that it does not elevate above the speaker. Continue, Senator Haynes.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Vice President, it is not expected that the opening of my contribution generated some excitement from the Minister of Labour. But as I was saying, the Minister took in front to say that she will not be going back next year, but you could have made the same statement for each and every one on your bench. Most of them will not be around next year. And then you know, Mr. Vice President, as I listened to the government during the course of this debate yesterday and in the House, it has never been more clear to me that we are dealing with a group of people who could not be more out of touch with the reality of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The Minister of Trade continues to be the clearest example of somebody who is out of touch with reality. The clearest example. Because on one hand, you can talk to a population, and we are certain you are not speaking to anybody outside of the Balize House Brigade. Because on one hand, you can come and tell us food prices have decreased. The minister in the office of the Prime Minister and with responsibility for gender affairs told us life is good. The Minister of Labour told us employment is good. So is it that whatever is going on over there, life is nice for them, but the rest of the population, all of the rest of us, we are lying or not telling the truth, lose our deposits? Mr. Vice President, it is the same level of boldfacedness that allows the Minister of Trade to stand here today and say, PNM did this, PNM did that, and want to take responsibility for everything, including being in government for the majority of years since our independence, but not take responsibility for the systemic decay that we are facing at Trinidad and Tobago. It is the same level of boldfacedness that will allow you, after 4 years, to say, we will get this done. When? You see, year one, you told us we'll get some of these things done, and I will give examples of things that they have been promising year after year after year. And year two, the population may say, okay, we'll give them a little chance. They'll get something done. By year 3, it was a pappy show. That was the year of the turnaround, right? We will get this done. You'll get things by 2019, etc. But by this year, after having done nothing for 4 years, to stand up here and tell us next year, I mean, you cannot be taking the people of Trinidad and Tobago seriously. You are trying to pappy show an entire nation, Mr. Vice President. Now, I have a lot of responses that I have to give to the contributions that were delivered here yesterday. But I want to first underscore something that is very important. And it's very important to most of the young people that are listening and tuning into this debate today. And I want to underscore the importance of what the leader of the opposition did on Friday, 11th October 2019. The Minister of Trade tried to diminish the economic transformation plan because, and I don't fault them for that, right? Because if you can't dream big for yourself, they've set a low standard for themselves, a very low bar. So it's not surprising that you can't aim higher. There's a remarkable lack of ambition on that side, and I'll get to that shortly. However, by presenting an economic transformation plan to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, it is a signal that the United National Congress is seeking to introduce new politics into Trinidad and Tobago. A politics that is prepared to face an election campaign, to face an electorate with a proper plan to take Trinidad and Tobago forward, a plan that we are willing to have everyone critique, participate in, and discuss. But you see, PNM does not know about that, Mr. Vice President. They are not familiar with that. I remember in 2014, I believe it was the opposition leader at the time and now Prime Minister saying, we will not discuss our plans because somebody might steal it. Pedestrian, right, Mr. Vice President? So what are we voting on if you are not going to tell us what you're going to do when you're getting in government? Now, the Minister of Labour said it yesterday and repeated it today in Crosstalk about the leader of the opposition. And I guess she's very concerned about how often she gets to see the leader of opposition. But I can tell you where you can find the leader of the opposition. Doing the work necessary to build a government for Trinidad and Tobago. You know, the funny thing is,
as well as other members on the other side. I continue from yesterday into today to have to remind you all that when you shout across the floor like that, I cannot hear the member that's contributing, whether they're on my right or whether they're on my left. Please allow the member to make their contribution.
Thank you again, Mr. Vice President. And the Minister of Labour is probably seeking to make up for all the times that she was unable to contribute to significant debates in this Parliament and trying to make up for lost time in crosstalk. But when you come to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and when you face the people of Trinidad and Tobago, when you are talking about the possibility of getting into government, you have to offer the people of Trinidad and Tobago something. This is an administration that came in, Mr. Vice President, having presented and articulated no plan to get Trinidad and Tobago moving forward. But you know what they did, Mr. Vice President, and as I stood for my debate today in the Commonwealth Journal of Lawyers. So there's an article published on Emailgate and the Emailgate saga and what it meant for parliamentary privilege. And it's interesting that I was standing here to speak today, and I'm going through what kind of Trinidad and Tobago we hope to create. And that article will be published today because that is the genesis of the problem that we had. And you're seeing it here again. That you have a political party, a political entity such as the PNM, that is willing to face the electorate on things that they are quite frankly just making up. Pieces of paper that you brought to Parliament, made up a scandal, made up an entire scandal, and faced the electorate on that. And they are doing that again today, introducing things into the debate that are not relevant to the electorate. So, Mr. Vice President, when you talk to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, what we have done, as Senator Sobers indicated yesterday, under the mandate of our political leader, is before we approach the Parliament to speak on behalf of people, that we must do so on the back of budget consultations, that we must do so on the back of the people of Trinidad and Tobago that we are seeking to represent. And what Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar did, one, by not only introducing a more mature political discourse, by giving our economic transformation plan well in advance of an election campaign, but also by, and this was instructive from Senator Drayton's contribution yesterday, because a number of things that Senator Drayton raised, we have addressed in our economic transformation plan. And we were able to do so because of the leadership of Mrs. Kamala Prasad-Bissessar having invited more persons to the decision-making table, and you get a younger generation of people. So I heard the Minister of Labour shouting out, you all need to get more experience. But we do have experience. The world that we live in today, Mr. Vice President, the world that they created, the world that the Trinidad and Tobago, that successive PNM administrations created, is a very difficult world for people who are under 40 years old in Trinidad and Tobago. Very difficult world. And then, I was educated in the United States of America.
Mr. Vice President, the Minister of Labour continuously, man.
Minister of Senator Obika and Minister of Labour. We have been going quite nicely for the last 3 hours. Every time I have to raise to my feet, the clock doesn't stop, it continues. And it interrupts the speaker. Going forward, I'll be giving no more warnings. I will just act. Continue, member.
Mr. Vice President, the goal is interruption, because when you have nothing to contribute to national development, what you try to do is destroy, Mr. Vice President. That's all that you try to do. So it is really not, it is not shocking. But what we...
I understand, no.
I apologize. Control the minister.
Continue, member.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'm going to deal right now with this OJT program, Mr. Vice President, because when we talk about creating jobs, it is because it is a very serious issue to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The Minister of Trade treated it like a joke. The Minister of Labour continues to show that the substance of the issue escapes her. And so therefore, Mr. Vice President, what we are talking about when we look at the OJT program, you would recall earlier this year in the mid-year review, the government came and asked us to give $39 million into the program. And Senator Drayton raised the point, and Senator Deoroop on a previous occasion raised the point that throwing money at our problems is not going to solve it. And that is what we have a government doing here today. But I want to just show that they have a pattern and a record of failed promises. So in the preparation for this debate, because this is not just looking at the appropriation for fiscal 2020, but you have to look at the track record of the government that is before us. Because as they go forward and they tell you something is going to happen next year, you have to see what their track record was like. Do you know, Mr. Vice President, that in the very first budget delivered by the Minister of Finance, there was a statement by the Minister of Finance talking about a graduate recruitment program. And I'm going to quote from the budget delivered in October 2015. The Minister of Finance stated, and I quote here, "In view of the fact that we have so many unemployed and or underemployed university graduates in our country today, we are introducing a graduate recruitment program in 2016 in all 23 ministries and Tobago. In the first instance, I propose to provide 55 million for employment at the end of the employment of at least 20 university graduates in each ministry with a suitable amount in Tobago for a total of 500 graduates. The program will be designed to utilize core competencies of these graduates in their various areas of study." This year, in the Standing Finance Committee, the same Minister of Finance who delivered that statement told us that no one was employed under the graduate recruitment program. You see, Mr. Vice President, they are in the habit of coming and making promises, of coming and telling the population we are going to do this. And then after 4 years, had the unmitigated goal to say nobody was hired. But trust us when we say we're increasing the number of OJTs to 8,000. You didn't do anything in 4 years, and in the last year, by magic, Mr. Vice President, we can't accept that. You know, they seem to now be emerging from a 4-year slumber, realizing today that youth employment and underemployment are serious concerns, but failing to realize when they talk about it that the problem is that our youths are victims of a broken system, and they are not offering solutions, but rather throwing money at a problem, and it would lead to nothing sustainable. You see, I listened to the Minister of Labour yesterday, and if Mr. Vice President, the Minister of Labour had anything of substance to contribute, she would have been able to tell us, so far, with the 39 million additional allocation this year, and in the 4 years of the tenure of this particular minister, what the OJT program would have accomplished, or what added value this PNM administration gave to the OJT program. You see, the minister came out and read what the mandate of the program is, and then told us that the goal is that you would go in and work for the private sector, and that you would, at the end of your 2-year tenure, you would be retained in that job because you would have been sufficiently impressive. Now, any responsible minister that would use this time to account to the public and account to the people of Trinidad and Tobago would have come here with numbers, because people would have been in the OJT program since the beginning of the tenure of the minister. People would have gone into the system, spent 2 years. The minister must have some sort of record of how many persons would have been retained, how many persons are currently employed within the system, how many persons have benefited from this program that we continuously put money towards, Mr. Vice President. You see, the thing is, Mr. Vice President, this is what when you have a government that is willing to always set a very low bar for themselves, you can just say that, look, we hired a number of persons, and then tell us nothing about what went beyond, because they are not interested in a conversation about nation building. They are not interested in a conversation about national development. They're interested in old politics, old pecan and bacchanal, and that is why they will not be elected in the next round, because the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Vice President, are quite frankly absolutely fed up of this kind of tribe. Absolutely fed up. Now, when you are talking about employment, and Senator Drayton raised it yesterday, and I have it here, Mr. Vice President, in terms of what our UNC government intends to do. But when you are talking about youth employment and you're talking about sustainable employment, now I remember the now Minister of Public Administration telling us that the young people in Trinidad and Tobago do not wish to have sustainable employment because we like to move around, transition. So that's why it makes sense to have these 2-year employment stints. But you know, when I listened to the Minister of Labour, as she spoke about the increased allocations, it was very clear that the minister had no overarching policy for this OJT program. No overarching policy. You see, was there any conversation, were they even thinking about a conversation between the Ministry of Education and the OJT program? Were they trying to align our developmental goals in any way to the OJT program? Is there an actual focus on youth employment, or is it simply a way to mammagai a number of votes in the next election year? Are you telling the people, the young people of Trinidad and Tobago, that what we'll do is give you 2 years and then dangle that 2 years in front of you and say, listen, you'll get a 10% increase, there'll be an increase in the number of you that will take part in the program, but then nothing beyond that? Mr. Vice President, it is the elements of this PNM administration where, one, they have a problem with prioritization, because I can hear in the crosstalk the Minister of Trade talking about which money, if we left any money for them to do X, Y, and Z. This is the minister that found the money for the pool. This is the government that found money to build Office of the Prime Minister in Tobago. They are building palaces and castles, Mr. Vice President, but they can't find money to invest in the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Again, because they are incapable of sensible governance. Incapable. Mr. Vice President, this government has failed to put job creation at the heart of any of their policy decisions or any of developmental plans. And to have the Minister of Labour come in and talk about an increased employment regionally, and make no mention of what employment is in Trinidad and Tobago right now, and then still having the goal to say that is the fact. What does the employment figures regionally have to do with the unemployed people in Trinidad and Tobago right now? And then to use a 2018 figure, Mr. Vice President, in the year that you sent so many people home, and tell us that employment is better for who? When we are in communities, Mr. Vice President, the number one issue facing people of Trinidad and Tobago today, jobs. They want jobs. They are not asking for handouts. They are not asking for grants. They are asking for the opportunity to earn a decent wage. And that is where they have failed. They have failed at creating opportunity. I want to come and tell us about hope. Mr. Vice President, Senator, and the Minister of Trade said it today. She said, we talk about job creation and whether we created jobs for our people. And I'll let the Minister of Trade know today. The people of Trinidad and Tobago are in fact UNC people. So you're right, we are creating jobs for our people. We're creating jobs for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is something that they are all unfamiliar with, Mr. Vice President. So when you want to come after being part of an administration that has stifled the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, that has made life so difficult for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and then want to tell us about who we are creating jobs for, you cannot speak the language of job creation because you simply do not know it, Mr. Vice President. The Prime Minister in the PowerPoint to the nation was okay with saying they've only lost 30,000 of the 55,000 jobs that the UNC created. So you've created no jobs, you've lost a certain number of jobs, and the numbers are skewed. The numbers are skewed because between empirical evidence and anecdotal evidence, you know that the people of Trinidad and Tobago are struggling right now to find work and to find sustainable employment. And that is as a direct result of their failed economic policies. Yesterday, when Senator Drayton was speaking, he gave the stories of Sita and Kevin. And those of us who are within our general age group are very familiar with that story. That is a story we know all too well. You can graduate from university and be extraordinarily worried about how you are going to make your way in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Vice President. There is no guarantee of this good life that they are promising. I don't know who they are speaking to, but there is no guarantee that you are going to make it in Trinidad and Tobago after having done every single thing that you could possibly do to live on the straight and narrow. But when we spoke about creating 50,000 jobs by 2025, and then going through to give the detail of how we intend to do that. It is because we understand that as a country, as a political entity, what we must do is motivate and inspire a population to create to greater heights, something that they are incapable of. And so we've spoken about the training and skills in various areas and shown again in detail, Mr. Vice President, how we would align all our policies, from our education policies to things like training and skill training and development, and how that is thrust towards creating 50,000 jobs by 2025. And again, as I said before, we understand that this is an ambitious goal, but it's a very doable goal. But what you need is the right kind of leadership, and the kind of leadership that would put all the aspects into work and push towards creating jobs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. You see, they've always asked us, not members of the government, and I know they mean it pejoratively, but they ask us, why you all join the UNC? How you find yourself there is the usual language they're trying to use and make a joke out of it. But they're right about one thing. When you look at the opposition bench in the Senate, it is a younger bench. It is a younger bench because young people in Trinidad and Tobago right now are making a decision, an informed and educated decision to join the United National Congress. The reasons that we would have done that, Mr. Vice President, is because we understand that their generation of leaders, the people that are sitting on the government bench right now, have failed the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. They have failed to effectively represent our needs. They have no clue, as a matter of fact, what our needs are. And they speak a language that, quite frankly, we cannot understand, because they are committed to a politics of the past, committed to an old school approach to political endeavors, which is why you can hear a tighten your belt in 2015 and see a massive road paving program in 2019 because the money appeared out of nowhere right before an election year. That is the type of politics that the population will reject outright in 2020. Now, Mr. Vice President, what people are calling for is effective representation of their needs. And to do so, you must communicate with the people of Trinidad and Tobago. You cannot sit in your office, you cannot drive around in your fancy car, and then come here and tell me food price is low because you say so. Impossible. I want to also, the Minister of Trade repeated a statement designed, Mr. Vice President, to fearmonger among the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and that is that we intend to devalue the dollar. You see, when I told you they are committed to email-gate politics, I was not joking, eh? Making things up out of thin air, you know, thin air. What they would have to come here and tell us businesses will close down because I'm not going to devalue the dollar, when none of that was said. You see, Mr. Vice President, the leader of the opposition would have said that right as it stands right now, Trinidad and Tobago cannot afford to continue on the path that this PNM administration has set us upon. That we cannot continue to live by accumulating more and more debt and by depleting hard-earned foreign exchange reserves. And that government must contain expenditure and must also facilitate national development, and that the central bank must strengthen our monetary policy stance. You see, they heard things like that and came up with one line, that we intend to devalue the dollar. We want to reject that outright, Mr. Vice President. I have to also reject another piece of absolute PNM propaganda outright, and that is on the issue of Petrotrin and the refinery. From day one, Mr. Vice President, we have maintained a call for transparency and accountability when it comes to the matters of Petrotrin from day one. Going side by side with that, from day one, we have stood and advocated for the fair treatment of the workers and the employees of the Petrotrin refinery. None of that has changed, Mr. Vice President, today. I stood here on several occasions, Mr. Vice President. I stood here on several occasions in defense of the Petrotrin employees and the Petrotrin workers. And those, Mr. Vice President, this is the same government, the same group of people that stood time and time again seeking to vilify those very employees of Petrotrin. And we must not forget the consistent narrative going from this government against Petrotrin employees, Mr. Vice President. I pulled an article because you are hearing from the government and their agents that the UNC is trying to keep the refinery shut. That could never be anything further from the truth. It is this PNM administration, this Keith Rowley administration that shut down Petrotrin in the first place. When you talk about the job losses, when you talk about the situation facing Petrotrin employees today, that is a direct result of a decision that they took, a decision that they still, to this day, cannot justify, Mr. Vice President. And you listen, and we understand. We understand that there's great political capital in creating and modeling the narrative around Petrotrin. But let us keep some of the facts in this matter very clear. August 2018, you made a decision to shut down Petrotrin. By September 2018, you said to the workers, they were going up and down talking about who was making $45,000 a month and that the Petrotrin workers bankrupt the country. Those are facts, Mr. Vice President. They are well documented in our national history. When we look back, Mr. Vice President, at the tenure of this government, as much as they will try now to say that this is not their fault and the plight that these workers are facing right now is not their fault, and now you are offering what appears to be an olive branch, but you still aren't offering any concrete job creation. You aren't saying how many of them will be re-employed, You are not saying how many persons will get their jobs back. You are, again, just throwing something out there and hoping it would stick. So I want to urge, Mr. Vice President, that as we continue to have a national discourse about a billion-dollar asset of our country, that we do so in a very sensible manner. Because the actions and decisions taken by the government today affects generations of Trinidadians and Tobagonians. Generations. And they may be able, because they've done it in the past, and apparently have remained committed to that kind of thing. But you may be able to play politics with billions of dollars, billion-dollar assets. But the people of Trinidad and Tobago, as I've said before, will reject that kind of politics outright in the future. Mr. Vice President, as I said before, they have a level of shamelessness that it is unprecedented. And I looked at the healthcare promises. Do you know that Point Fortin Hospital, in a previous budget, the Minister of Finance said it would be operational by September 2019? You know that? Yeah, it's coming. We know that's, standard. Coming soon is their standard refrain, that it would be operational by September 2019. It is October 2019, and that's what I'm talking about when I say shamelessness, Because if that were me, Mr. Vice President, I would not be able to still sit there and say it's coming soon, when the date has already passed not once but twice, Mr. Vice President. This is not the first time they have set a target, revised the target in our budget, and then come to tell us, coming soon. Mr. Vice President, the number of promises in this budget and previous budgets that were repeated and taken over and over. And the Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And that the government repeated while having failed to deliver to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It makes me wonder if it is possible, when they are going to canvass the population for their votes, are they really brave enough to go and knock on anybody's door and shake anybody's hand? Because, Mr. Vice President, what we are hearing, when we were on walkabouts earlier this week, what I am hearing is, be careful when you're out there, because people they are not going to tie their dogs when you come. They are set and waiting for most of you, Mr. Vice President. And, I wish the Minister of Public Utilities was here. I listened to him in the Standing Finance Committee. Almost at the same time the Minister was in the Standing Finance Committee, we were in a community in Grandy. And in that community, they were telling us that they had no water for well over 2 months, and that they have a water problem that is ongoing and recurring. And they were trying to figure out, how is it that 2010 to 2015 they had water, and then all of a sudden, you can't get water now. Yeah, rain stopped falling in the reservoir. Mr. Vice President, and when I repeat most of the times, and I try to give the government as best as I can, because my goal here, and all of our goal on this side on this bench, is national development. And so I say to them most of the time that people are looking on at you. People are listening to what you are saying. They are looking at your behavior. They can recognize that you have repeated promises. They do not trust the things you are saying. They are looking at what you are presenting to the population. And they are also looking at us, Mr. Vice President. They are looking at us as well. And you see, the thing is, the United National Congress has said, we are committed to our policy of national development. We are committed to working to get Trinidad and Tobago working again. So we have no problem with scrutiny. We have no problem with accountability, because the choice is clear, Mr. Vice President. We have shown our commitment to bringing more persons to the decision-making table. When we speak the language of transformation, we are also showing the actions of transformation. It is very clear from what you are seeing from a new United National Congress. Our new approaches to policy-making, decision-making, our new approaches to politics, Mr. Vice President, is what will create the Trinidad and Tobago that we want to see. And you know that when people are looking on at you, and what you say, if you do not do the actions that correlate to what you're saying, nobody will believe. Nobody will believe what you are saying. And so, when we approach the electorate, Mr. Vice President, we do so with a coherent plan for national development. We do so with a proven track record of delivery, and we can hold our head high because we are ambitious, but we have shown that we can do the work to take Trinidad and Tobago forward. And I thank you.
Communications.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Allow me to express my sincerest thanks to you for the opportunity to join this debate today on the Appropriation Bill 2019, financial year 2020. As I do so, Mr. Vice President, let me say how honored I am to have been afforded the opportunity to return to the service of the people of Trinidad and Tobago in this capacity. In my maiden speech in this august chamber, I feel duty-bound, even compelled to offer gratitude to God and to my mother, who has been, traversing with me, and to the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago for the confidence he has reposed in me. Mr. Vice President, at one point, while listening, I thought that this debate was about the Minister of Trade and the Minister of Labor. You see, what happens, Mr. Vice President, is that nobody likes to hear about the good of the People's National Movement. And whenever anyone speaks about it, it riles them up and they kick and scream, Mr. Vice President. But Mr. Vice President, I move on. As you are aware, and indeed I am sure my fellow senators gathered here too, I spent a number of years serving in one of the diplomatic missions abroad. And in the interface with the persons abroad, they always say, you know, you all don't know how good you have it in Trinidad and Tobago because of the fact that they live there and we are here. And they always comment about the fact that, you know, we have it so nice and we think that they are doing well, but they wish they were here, right? There are some who comment negatively, of course, about the country because sometimes it's what they hear. But then the conversation would turn to how much harder it is for them in the diaspora to eke out a living. You see, Mr. Vice President, if you find yourself unemployed abroad, make sure and find a soup kitchen somewhere, because there isn't a neighbor or a tanti or aji or aja that you could visit, and you're sure you will get a plate of food and even some to carry home. If you find yourself evicted, for whatever reason, there is no uncle or aunt or nenen you could visit, and you sure would get a place to rest your head. Actually, you may have to look for a homeless shelter. So outside there, it could be cold and impersonal at times, and it's every man for himself. And you would at times end up wondering, why did you ever leave sweet Trinidad and Tobago? So that is why, Mr. Vice President, when I listened to the Minister of Finance budget presentation some weeks ago, and I want to commend him for his presentation, and I listened to that of my colleague's presentation, the Minister of Public Administration and Minister in the Ministry of Finance, I could not help but smile to myself because, for me, it was even further evidence of this government's ensuring that the average citizen of this country could still provide for their basic needs and could still find comfort in knowing that there is a government in office who will look after persons in every strata of society and could also reflect on how much has been accomplished with so much less. I moved to daycare centers, Mr. Vice President. It was my own journey as a single woman that caused me to applaud the Minister of Finance when he announced the establishment of daycare centers in communities throughout Trinidad and Tobago, so that single parents with children under the age of 3 will now have an additional option to open to them. The National Parenting Policy of Trinidad and Tobago categorized single parents in Trinidad and Tobago as a vulnerable group, and that policy cited research which found that while single parents provided a similar level of childcare as coupled parents, they were at a higher level risk of poverty and experienced higher levels of financial challenges and unemployment. Studies also found that children of single parents demonstrate lower levels of academic achievement with consequent limited employment prospects. So, Mr. Vice President, put simply, what these studies are saying is that single parents, while doing their best, are in dire need of help. And no longer will single parents be denied the opportunity to return to gainful and meaningful employment because they cannot afford the cost of daycare. No longer will single parents be denied the opportunity to return to school because they do not trust to leave their children in the care of persons who are untrained or ill-equipped to handle the children. No longer will single mothers be denied the luxury of self-care because the toddler's ever-present needs always takes precedence over hers. This simple yet significant act of providing daycare centers for single parents, Mr. Vice President, opens up a broad spectrum of opportunities for those who need it most. So when people talk about what did the government do, this about the single parents is very, 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 very important, Mr. Vice President. With respect to GAP, Mr. Vice President, one of the critical pull factors that allowed me to more easily make the decision to return home from abroad was the facility provided here by the Trinidad and Tobago government to care for the elderly, including my own mother. Mr. Vice President, I am sure all of us in this chamber would move the highest mountain to ensure that our mothers, indeed our parents, are provided with adequate care in their winter years. Today, this government offers such care on a 24-hour basis to elderly through the Geriatric Adolescents Partnership Program, or GAP. And let's face it, today's world is better at understanding the emotional labor and the countless hours childcare takes from families. But there is still much work to be done on what it takes to care for the elderly and its impact on everyone's well-being, financially and mental health. The growth of the older population means that there is a greater need of caregivers, which is why the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services introduced GAP. For those unfamiliar with GAP, it's an intensive short-term intergenerational training program that imparts knowledge and skills about elder care to young persons. And trainees are actively engaged in classroom sessions and are supervised in field placement, in private homes and institutional settings in the trainees community. And I just want to say too that, these are programs, this is one of the other programs, like OJT, that is well thought out. The objectives are to develop a sense of self-worth and self-discipline among young people and to help bridge the gap between young people and the elderly. This allows for more effective interaction, positive outcomes, and the development of caring skills. And so essentially, GAP fosters a sense of self-worth, discipline, and national consciousness in our young people who can now interface effectively with the older adults. I would know, because I am benefiting from this program and has seen the effects it has had on my mom. So those who might dismiss GAP as just another make-up social program, there are studies which found that intergenerational care contributed and improved the quality of life for the young and old and had lasting positive effects on everyone. Mr. Vice President, when I was abroad, my mom was with me and my mom was ill. She was in and out of the hospital. And it was very tough for me because, of course, I was not entitled to home care for my mom. So this was a very difficult situation where your mom was, bedridden, and she became bedridden actually while we were there, and in and out of the hospital. No assistance because of the fact that, everybody busy. I had to work and couldn't afford the level of home care because it was so expensive. So as a matter of fact, almost every cent that I made is what I had to pay people to stay home with my mom because I had to ensure that she was well taken care of because I knew she took care of me in my formative years. And I want to say, and I want to commend the government of Trinidad and Tobago because I'm now a beneficiary of this GAP program. And I have a testimony where that is concerned. Because of the fact that now there's someone who takes care of her at least from 8 to 4. And I'm hoping that, soon we will, have the program adjusted, that we may have another shift on to assist. So I just want to thank the government of Trinidad and Tobago because this has been really beneficial for me. And I know a lot of persons has been benefiting for it. And we must speak our success stories. We must speak what is good. All right, although persons could get upset about it, but it is a PNM government that has been instituted this, and a lot of persons in this country, thousands, are benefiting from it. Similarly, Mr. Vice President, the establishment of additional shelters for victims of domestic violence. Domestic abuse represents an increase in the options available for women in particular, and this is another program which is geared towards persons who have been abused. Traditionally, women who find themselves in such unfortunate situations often have to endure the added torture of not having a secure and safe space available to them. And while that is one government building we hope will never be utilized, we can ill afford to bury our collective heads in the proverbial sand and pretend that the need either does not exist or that there are currently sufficient spaces to which a victim of intimate partner violence can easily find safety. The success of any government, Mr. Vice President, and the mark of a maturing, caring society is found in the emphasis that is placed on those who often stand on the periphery of the society, the widows and orphans, and the poor and the elderly. And these three measures alone, the provision of daycare centers for single parents, care for the elderly, and the establishment of safe houses for victims of domestic violence are tangible evidence of a government that knows and accepts its responsibility for the creation of a just and caring society. Mr. Vice President, I move to the increase in the minimum wage. More than that, Mr. Vice President, the increase in the minimum wage, which puts an additional $400 in the pockets of minimum wage earners every month, might appear minuscule to some who occupy seats either here or in the other place. But that means a whole lot to the nearly 200,000 persons who will benefit. And that extra $400 could very well mean a single mother not having to work an extra shift and be able to pay for her child who is sitting the SEA exam. That extra $400 a month, combined eventually with the establishment of the daycare centers for single parents, could make the entire difference between someone settling into a minimum wage job with little hope of advancement and a young, bright individual breaking the cycle of poverty to which they might have grown accustomed. And that is why it never ceases to amaze me, Mr. Vice President, when I hear those of us who now find ourselves in positions to assist others deprecate the efforts of those who seek to do so. For while we in the Senate and our colleagues in other places are guaranteed a meal at lunchtime or tea time in the dining area upstairs, we are unsure whether the persons who serve us those meals have anything to eat themselves, and therefore would rejoice at the extra $400 in their salary at the end of the month. So, Mr. Vice President, I want to offer a word of caution to my friends on the opposite bench who heap scorn on this measure, because we must never forget where we came from, because all of this, and I repeat, all of this is just temporary. I move to the OJT program.
46 for Mr. Vice President. We never have heap scorn or anything. It's offensive. With respect.
Mr. Vice President, there's no mean to be offensive, but I recognize that the truth offends. I move to the OJT program, Mr. Vice President. How many times have we heard our young graduates in particular? And I heard the member, Senator Haynes, made some comments about the OJT program. And I just want to say that how many times have we heard our young graduates in particular and our young people complain about not getting a job because they don't have work experience, you know? So I don't want us to diminish the importance of the OJT program in any way, because many times persons cannot get a job because people are looking for someone with experience, and that OJT program provides very good experience for persons who wish to move on, of course. In 2002, under a PNM government, that changed. Thanks to the conceptualization and the rollout of the on-the-job training program, close to 5,000 of our young persons, and I heard the senator ask for figures, close to 5,000 of our young citizens are now provided with 24 solid months of paid work experience. But that's not what attracted much chatter and media attention, I realize. It was the announcement by the Minister of Finance that the stipends of these trainees will be increased by 10% from December 1st, 2019. And he also announced that the program will now be able to accommodate 8,000 citizens. An increase of that allows just about 3,000 more of our citizens to get much more work experience, which is needed. And what this means is at over a 2-year period, 8,000 young persons who are between the ages of 16 and 35 will gain practical work experience both in the private and public sector. And statistics from the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise, and the Minister spoke earlier on, shows that the OJTs are placed without discrimination in jobs throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. More so, the ministry continues to work with employers to ensure that there are training plans to develop these trainees who are seeking much-needed work experience. And the plan is in train to expand the current list of employers to include a wider range of private sector and state enterprises. So I heard that, that there is no plan. But I think that the senator just has to do some more homework, because it's all there for you. It's all there. This plan will ensure that trainees are matched as closely as possible to their qualifications. And of course, this provides them with the opportunity to gain experience which are applicable to their career path. For this reason, if no other, this is why the OJT program is critical to Trinidad and Tobago and our changing world of work. So, Mr. Vice President, I heard some people criticizing the increase for OJTs on the basis that the stipends are already high, and therefore the OJTs would be unable to readjust to the private sector, where the salaries are much lower. That's what we're hearing. But for the record, Mr. Vice President, we're going to have figures. The stipends paid to OJTs are as follows. Level 1 CXC craft level training, $2,758. Level 2 CAPE, A-level diploma, $3,960. Level 3 associate degree, $4,950. Level 4 undergraduate degree, $6,875. Level 5 postgraduate degree, $7,920. At the lowest end, therefore, the 10% increase would amount to a mere $275, while at the postgraduate level, the increase would amount to $792. So I would like any member of the opposition to tell this chamber where in the private sector does someone with postgraduate qualifications currently earn less than $8,000 per month. And if they can point me out to that, then I'm being disturbed, Mr.
Senator Obika.
I need entry time, please, Mr. Vice President.
Minister, as you would know, there's no injury time in this chamber. Continue, Minister.
Thank you very much. So I was speaking about the OJT program, Mr. Vice President, that they don't want to hear about, and because what they were saying was not true pertaining to the OJT program. So I understand why the senator would start to rile again. So, Mr. Vice President, if they can point me to a direction where they would find someone with a postgraduate degree getting, less than $8,000 per month, then I would like them to tell me if they think that that is a fair wage. I move to NALIS, which is in the Ministry of Communication. Trinidad and Tobago's rate of recidivism is unacceptably high, and many view the prison system as a revolving door, rather than a place of rehabilitation, where the freedom that comes with restorative justice replaces the self-imposed prisons of retribution and revenge. It is for this reason that the National Library and Information System Authority, which we would call NALIS, has ensured that there are libraries in the women's prison, in the maximum prison, the Youth Training Center, and the Port of Spain prison. And during this fiscal year, Mr. Vice President, it is our intention to widen the scope to include a library in the remand yard at Golden Grove, the Eastern Correctional and Rehabilitation Facility in Santa Rosa, and the Tobago Prison. And we are also going to ensure that similar facilities are available to those participating in the MILAT and MyPath programs, so that they too can benefit from the world of opportunities that came from accessing a properly stocked library. More than ensuring that libraries can be found in each of our penal institutions, NALIS is currently working on a plan which would ensure that sufficiently qualified and recommended inmates of these institutions be trained and employed under the OJT program again. I want to repeat that, under the OJT program again, to provide library services during their period of incarceration. So, Mr. Vice President, you and I have heard the horror stories of what happens to families when their loved ones are incarcerated, and if they were the previous breadwinners of the family. I want this chamber to envisage for a minute the possibility of someone who is incarcerated and earning a monthly stipend with which they can still take care of their family. Moreover, envisage again the possibility of that incarcerated person being able to help the family of his or her victim, whom they might have robbed of a breadwinner as well. That, Mr. Vice President, goes to the heart of restorative justice. Mr. Vice President, I wait with bated breath for the launch of this program. There is already one success story where a previous inmate of the women's prison, having served her sentence, is now gainfully employed through the OJT program in a library in the East. She is doing phenomenally well and serves as a motivational speaker at NALIS-led outreaches. Moreover, the current board of NALIS, in collaboration with the Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts, has pioneered the co-location of libraries in our newly built community centers. Already, libraries can be found in the Mount Hope, Mount Lambert Community Center, in the Beetham Gardens Community Center, and also in Barataria. This represents a sterling example of what it means to do more for less. By co-locating library services in community centers, the government is able to reach out to a much broader cross-section of the society. And NALIS proposes to expand its list of co-located libraries during the financial year to St. Helena and Princestown, just to name a few. Additionally, we intend to complete the Mayaro Public Library, which is 95% completed and has now been redesigned to accommodate commercial space on the ground floor. Our intention, Mr. Vice President, to establish a model whereby this library will be self-sufficient in that the rental income derived from the commercialization of the ground floor will be used to offset whatever recurrent expenditure required for its operation. In the same vein, the Minister of Finance has allocated $10 million to the Chaguanas Public Library, and this library is about 68% complete. And it is our intention to see how much we can do with our current resources before the mid-year review. The other bit of good news, where our libraries are concerned, is that the Toko Library is expected to be built during this fiscal year, and work will commence on the long-awaited Diego Martin Public Library. So, Mr. Vice President, veteran journalist Walter Cronkite once said, and I quote, "Whatever the cost of our libraries, the price is cheap compared to that of an ignorant nation," unquote. And I endorse that view, Mr. Vice President, and commit the Ministry of Communication to doing its part in the creation of a knowledge-based society where information is the new currency, especially in this time when it is easy for us to build walls that exclude based on race and color, on gender and political affiliation, on class and educational status. It is our hope that libraries will empower our people, especially our young people, to tear down those walls. National Archives, which is under the Ministry of Communication. Mr. Vice President, another significant player in the ministry. I am happy to report that the National Archives, in collaboration with the Tobago Library Services, marked the reopening of the Tobago Archives in June of this year in the Activity Center of the Scarborough Library. You see, following the earthquake of 1997, which destroyed the old Scarborough Library, the safety of the documents were compromised, and to date, 60% of the records have been restored by the National Archives and returned to Tobago. Many of these records have also been digitized, allowing for access in both Trinidad and Tobago. The Tobago Archives had been inaccessible for 22 years. Therefore, its reopening is significant to Tobagonians, as research on Tobago can now be facilitated in Tobago. Thank you. Once more, our sister isle has its own records, including, but not limited to, records dating back to 1763, including slave records, colonial records related to the establishment of Tobago, churches, villages, and plantation estates, minutes of the Tobago House of Assembly, Tobago court records, Tobago gazettes, newspaper and digitized records of maps, photographs, and numerous other documents of historical importance. But that's not all the National Archives is doing. It's ensuring that the records of Trinidad and Tobago are available online to everyone, all of whom use the archives as a primary source of information, but not all of whom reside in Trinidad and Tobago. In today's digital age, it's a new norm that people go online to access records and such research material. Family records generate a lot of interest. People want to find out about their roots. The East Indian Indentureship Register, the Chinese Indentureship Records, and Registry of Slaves continue to attract a lot of attention. Mr. Vice President, the National Archives of Trinidad and Tobago is the home of original records for most of the ministries, it should come as no surprise that there are a number of online queries for access to archival material from Trinidad and Tobago. Right now, all the National Archive has is a list of its records, but the public expectation is that the actual archive should be available on the website. This is why, over the last fiscal, the National Archives has made major strides in this area. In fact, from 2015 to present, close to 110,000 pages have been digitized, and the process continues every day to ensure the records of the National Archives are available online via its website. I'd like to speak a little about some environmental initiatives, Mr. Vice President. Another notable initiative in this year's budget is an announcement by the Minister of Finance that the government will remove all taxes and duties on LED bulbs or accessories to support this country's transition to LED lighting and, of course, reduce our carbon footprint. Many have thumbed their noses at this announcement and questioned the real value, but there are numerous examples which show that the use of LED leads to the utilization of less energy. For instance, the average household saves just about 25% on their electricity bill when they make that switch to LED light bulbs. So therefore, your bulbs actually last longer. But I just want to, yesterday, Senator Sobers spoke about it being the People's Partnership idea concerning the LED bulbs. So, Mr. Vice President, I searched high and low to see if I could find where the People's Partnership government introduced LED bulbs. I looked to see where they introduced tax measures concerning LED bulbs. I found nothing, Mr. Vice President. So I don't know how all of a sudden they are now trying to claim it. Just now they will claim that they invented the LED bulb, if that is the case. Studies show that LED equals sustainable technology and energy efficiency. And one research which looked at the feasibility of replacing the conventional fluorescent lamp with LED lamps at a faculty building in Malaysia found that the use of LED resulted in power reduction savings. And despite this, the prohibitive cost of embracing the LED movement cannot be ignored. Manufacturing costs are coming down and prices are falling. But by and large, LED is still very out of the reach of many households. And this is why in many countries, great intentions have not been converted into action. And high costs have prevented any real movement towards a large-scale implementation of LED. But this government understands that and is intervening by removing that hurdle. And the move to take away all taxes and duties on LED bulbs and similar accessories means that there is one less excuse why we shouldn't take that sustainable step, at least via LED. And even if you can't get on board now, there's time to do so, because this tax break will be in place for a 5-year period in the first instance. But, Mr. Vice President, we are not simply giving out LED bulbs. In fact, the LED bulb initiative is part of a larger program designed by this government to foster energy efficiency and energy conservation. And this program will be backed by a comprehensive educational program to facilitate behavioral change. The program will be a collaboration between the Ministry of Public Utilities and the Ministry of Education, and will include the retrofitting of 30 primary and 30 secondary schools. I move on to, because I know my time is going, so I want to speak just about a few environmental initiatives, The San Fernando to Point 14 Highway, the 35-kilometer Solomon Hochul Highway to Point 14 project, will include the Mosquito Creek elevated roadway, which is expected to bring an end to flooding in the area. The section of the highway is being protected from sea blasts and storm surges by andesite boulders. Its construction adheres to strict environmental standards through the environmental impact assessment process in order to ensure environmental sustainability. The Valencia to Toco road upgrade, which is presently under construction, will bring opportunities for sustainable lifestyles for communities along the route. And these communities include Valencia, Sandy Grande, Matura, Salibia, Rampanalgas, Cumana, Sanssouci, Toco, Grand Riviere, and Matalat. Similarly, the Churchill-Rollville Highway extension to Manzanilla, underscores sustainable development for the communities of Kumuto, Manzanilla, Sandy Grande, Mayaro, and Guayari. Coastal protection work is also being undertaken in several communities to re-establish these communities as models for sustainable development. And there's a comprehensive strategy to treat with drainage and flooding throughout the country. And we targeted 369 active desilting projects and have surpassed our targets for 2017 and 2018. And we can see the effects of climate change on our small island developing state. Greater precipitation or rainfall is one of the contributors to flooding, and it is directly linked to climate change. Rehabilitation of our magnificent 7 heritage building is important to our history and culture. As a Jamaican journalist and orator said, a people without the knowledge of their past, history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Stormeyer's Castle and Whitehall are now resplendent. The Red House and President House are near completion, and the refurbishing of Millfleur is in progress. And our government considers the promotion of renewable energy alternatives very important to energy conservation through the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, another effect of climate change. The establishment of the Toko Port and Maruga Fishing Port will also be subjected to stringent environmental measures in keeping with our need to ensure sustainable development in Trinidad and Tobago. The elimination of the use of styrofoam and single-use plastics is a step towards reducing this type of waste that enters our watercourse, contributing to flooding. Based on an article published in the National Geographic in December 2018, 8.3 billion metric tons of plastic has been produced. 6.3 billion metric tons has become plastic waste. 12% has been incinerated. 79% accumulated in landfills. 91% of plastic is not recycled. And the UN's theme for World Environment Day 2018 was Beat Plastic Pollution. And our government is working to beat plastic pollution to provide a safe and healthy environment for present and future generations. Mr. Vice Chairman, I just want to speak a little bit about some of the initiatives in the health sector. And I would want to move to the, heard someone mention about, that as if nothing was done. And I just want to say quickly, the long-awaited Arima Hospital is 90% completed and is expected to be open before the end of the year. The third turn-in for the central block of the Port of Spain General Hospital is expected to take place soon, supposed to be at least by next month. We've heard the cries of the borough of Point Fortin, and that hospital will be delivered and open in the first quarter of 2020. The residents of Diego Martin will get a new health center when it is opened in 2020. The Sandy Grande Hospital will be completed in 2022, and the sod was turned recently. I think it was October the 4th for the Sandy Grande Hospital. The Linear Accelerator, or LINAC, facility at the St. James Medical Complex has been completed and was handed over to the Minister of Health. It's currently in the testing phase, as is mandatory, but should be opened in January 2020. And this service will offer more targeted treatment for some tumors, reducing waiting times, and have a positive impact on patient survival, among other benefits. So, Mr. Vice President, it is often said that your health is your wealth, and these are just some of the achievements in the health sector. And this is just some because I know the Minister of Health would have spoken about it. And this demonstrates that this government continues to invest in the well-being of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So I'll have to skip some of my notes, Mr. Vice President, because I want to stay within the allotted time limit. So, Mr. Vice President, the Prime Minister has continuously spoken about the creation of a society.
Minister, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vice President, the Prime Minister has continuously spoken about the creation of a society based on proper values, on acceptable standards of behavior, on opportunities for growth and advancement, and most significantly, on providing opportunity for persons to break the cycles of poverty, violence, of neglect, of illiteracy, and of hopelessness. And I'm happy to say that the Ministry of Communication, which I now have the honor to lead, is playing a leading role in this regard. Mr. Vice President, the Ministry of Communication will not only coordinate the activities of these agencies to which I have alluded, but will also seek to fulfill its own mandate in the coming year. As you and the national population are aware, it is only recently that I was appointed to this position, and it is my intention to honor the confidence that was reposed in me by the Honorable Prime Minister. Our mandate at the Ministry of Communication, Mr. Vice President, is to coordinate and implement government's communication strategies, manage the creation, security, storage, and dissemination of all information resources, and in so doing, create a more open, accessible, and transparent government. And it is certainly my prayer that the Ministry of Communication will continue to fulfill its mandate and provide the national community with information on the government's achievements and programs. And if information is to be the lifeblood of this society, Mr. Vice President, we at the Ministry of Communication stand ready to do our part. I thank you.
Honourable members, I think now is a good time to take the lunch break. This House will now stand suspended until 2:05.